Hello everyone, so today I decided that it would be a good idea to upload a compilation of all of the mod reviews I did in the year 2020. So I did a lot of reviews then, and that's when the channel first began to grow, really. It started with the Europa Barbarorum 2 review, and the last one I did was for Rome Total Realism Platinum Edition 2.0 for Rome Total War. So, without further ado, here are all the mod reviews I did in the year 2020, presented in chronological order. Enjoy. In my opinion, Europa Barbarorum 2 is the best mod for Medieval 2 Total War, and in this video, I'm going to tell you why. With the release of the original Rome Total War, many fans of the series started to clamor for more historical accuracy from the game, with its Bronze Age Egyptians, flaming pigs, bright pink Parthians, and Spain being the name of a faction in a game that starts in 270 BC, many history buffs went into a frenzy, demanding a greater adherence to historical truths in order to increase the immersion of the game. After all, how can you feel like a real king of Armenia if your capital in 270 BC is Artaxata, which was not constructed until approximately 100 years later? Well, along came Europa Barbarorum 1 to save the day, and push the boundaries of how devoted to history a Total War game could be. Europa Barbarorum 2 is the successor to EB1, and it shows in almost every way. The soundtrack is essentially the same, many of the graphics are the same, many of the loading screens are the same, and the overall atmosphere is very similar, despite the base game being Medieval 2, a game that is not at all based in the Roman period. Let's go over all the aspects of Europa Barbarorum 2 one by one and outline why I think it's the best mod for Medieval 2, and perhaps of all time. The aesthetic of Europa Barbarorum is very unique. There really isn't another mod quite like it. You can see this immediately from the faction selection screen. What are these factions? Most of them are in fact factions everyone is aware of. The Kingdom of Macedon is Macedonia, the Romae are the Romans, but those are the easy ones. Who are the Suebas? Well, of course they are the Suebi, one of the German tribes that caused Rome lots of trouble over the course of their history. What is Hayastan? Hayastan is the Armenian word for Armenia, though technically in this time period they should probably be called Haik instead, but that's okay. What is the Koinon Hellenon? Well, those are the Greek cities, of course. The localized faction names are just the start of the player's journey into Europa Barbarorum, as those are the only translated terms. Once you get into the game and have a look around the campaign map, you will find that pretty much everything is translated into the native language of that faction. Everything down to the agents is translated. So, for example, for Hayastan, Armenia, instead of having a diplomat, you have a divanaget. All of your units are also translated. And these can be a real doozy, since if your faction, like Hayastan, Armenia in this example, is located in a very multi-ethnic area, you'll have units in your army with names that are from classical Georgian, classical Armenian, Parthian, Greek normalizations of foreign words in languages that have been lost. You can get lost in this stuff. And when I was a kid, I did get lost in EB1, and it was great. It's great here in EB2 as well. The soundtrack is also excellent in general. The campaign map tracks in particular are quite iconic, and some of them have even been done by musicians who specialize in ancient music. The Celtic tracks in particular, I believe. It's really a memorable soundtrack for all cultures. There is one track I don't like in particular, the Eastern Battle track. It sounds like a Vuvuzela festival along with burly men yelling, and it's just quite jarring. I understand that lovely music didn't play during battles historically, until the period of Empire and Napoleon, but something a little more listenable would have been preferred here. But in general, excellent soundtrack, very iconic. especially the campaign map tracks. For a mod, the work that has been done in this department is phenomenal and unprecedented. Another extremely nice touch is the language mods that they have put in. That is, the units don't speak in stereotypical accented English, but rather in their native language, or at least something close to it. There are language packs for Latin, Greek, Celtic, Parthian, and a few others, I think. Of course, this means that some factions unfortunately use a language pack that isn't 100% appropriate, such as the Saka Rauka or Hayastan that uses the Parthian language pack, but such things are unavoidable in a mod of this magnitude. The part of the game that has no doubt received the largest facelift is the campaign map. I'm not only referring to the map itself here, which has indeed been changed significantly, but I'm also talking about the mechanics. The map feels very alive in Europa Barbarorum 2. There are many small towns and other new pieces on the campaign map that flesh it out quite a bit. Both the campaign map cities and the battle map cities have been completely redone, and they truly look unique. Every culture has very appropriate battle map models for their towns, and they make you feel like you're fighting against or for that culture rather than a more generic settlement. Pretty much everything in the game comes with a historical explanation and description. Almost every single province has a quote-unquote building that is just there to provide the historical background of that province to the player. Almost every faction character at the start of the game begins with a biography trait that gives the player all he needs to know about that person. Every year, you get a scroll entitled This Year in History that gives you the rundown of most of the major historical events that took place in that year. It's all just great for immersion. All of these elements combined really make Europa Barbarorum 2 stand out aesthetically. Now, let's get into the gameplay mechanics of the mod. The campaign. The area where Europa Barbarorum 2 truly shines from a gameplay perspective is in its campaign. In terms of the campaign gameplay, you have to know your history in order to succeed, or else you have to learn quickly. This is especially true if you're playing a more difficult faction, like a small tribe or a small kingdom. One of the major improvements to the campaign map here is to the minor factions, which in colloquial terminology are called slaves or generic rebels for Total War fans of Rome 1 and Medieval 2, since every province in those games couldn't have a specific faction due to the game engine limitations. This, in my opinion, was one of the biggest limitations of those old games that were based on this same engine and was a real immersion killer, since it removes a lot of possibilities and factors in the campaign, when huge swaths of the map are just generic rebels that everyone is at war with and can never do diplomacy with. These generic rebels also tend to be real pushovers that don't build up or go on the offensive. This is not so in Europa Barbarorum 2. While you can't have diplomacy with the rebel provinces, and they aren't exactly as active as major factions, they can wield significant power in EB2, and even go on the offensive at times. Of course, all of this is dependent on the historical situation in that region. For a faction like the Aedui, a Gaulish tribe, you have a small settlement, Bibracti, where you start from, and the other settlements near you represent other tribes. These rebels are not as strong as some other provinces on the map, since they weren't exactly separate kingdoms in their structure, but rather just tribes like your own Aedui faction. Taking Hayastan, Armenia again as an example, the situation is very different from a faction like the Aedui. Historically, in this time period, to 272 BC, Armenia was ruled by the Yervanduni dynasty, the Orontid dynasty in Greek, and was a sort of Achaemenid successor state, similar to the situation in Pontus. The Yervanduni dynasts were kings, minted coins, and used writing in a somewhat limited way, perhaps mostly Aramaic and Greek on perishable materials. Utilizing data about the ethnic and tribal makeup of the landscape of this region from sources such as Xenophon and Strabo, we know that the area was very diverse, with many different tribes and groups. We also know that the following dynasty, the Artaxiads, faced several internal issues based on internal divisions and spent a lot of time trying to reform and centralize the kingdom to a greater degree. Thus, in Europa Barbarorum II, you have the Yervanduni dynasty ruling a sort of tribal kingdom, which is reflected in-game as a building that represents the structure of your government. Hayastan had a rocky relationship with their southern neighbor, the Seleucid Empire, aka the Grey Death, in that time period, and was often forced to pay tribute if wars didn't go their way. Thus, at the start of the game, similar to the starting situation with Bactria, you have to pay a tribute of 3,000 gold every turn in order to maintain good relations with the Seleucids. Once you're prepared and ready to fight them, you can stop the payments and the Seleucids will respond with violence. This is a total war game after all. However, this is not the only issue facing your burgeoning kingdom in Europa Barbarorum II. There were several other kingdoms in a similar situation in 272 BC. To the southeast, you have the kingdom of Media Atropatene, which was another pretty powerful Achaemenid successor state type kingdom. While they are not a major faction in the game, they are represented by a rich province and around 3 powerful armies that will defend their city and attack when they deem it necessary. To the west, you have the small kingdom of Armenia Minor, with its capital at Ani Kamach, which is also strong, but not as strong as Media Atropatene. To the north, you have the Caucasian kingdoms of Colchis and Caucasian Iberia, or Egrisi and Kartli in the game, respectively. To the northeast, you have the smaller, less developed land of Caucasian Albania, or Arvank in the game. You yourself are pretty comparable in power to Media Atropatene, but since you are surrounded by a group of fairly developed kingdoms at the start, your best bet for quick expansion is Arvank, since they have the least developed kingdom of the bunch. Also, since the kingdom of Kartli also had an agreement with the Seleucids historically, an attack on them will not be viewed very kindly by your southern Seleucid neighbors. Basically, if you know your history, you can make more logically sound decisions on the campaign map. This increases the campaign immersion quite a bit, in my opinion. Going to the west, let me use the Koinon Hellenon, the Greek cities, as another example. Of course, like in vanilla Rome Total War, there was no unified state called the Greek cities. It is a representation of a possible league or alliance of the independent Greek cities, which is basically a good gameplay mechanic that acts as a counterbalance to the more powerful kingdom of Macedon. However, Europa Barbarorum II does far more than vanilla Rome Total War ever did to make this faction feel like a real league of cities. You have several families that represent the various leaders of various city-states, such as Athens, Sparta, etc. You also have access to different units in different cities, adding to the hodgepodge nature of the Koinon Hellenon faction and campaign. It's quite a fun compromise between the completely ahistorical and immersion-breaking Greek cities of vanilla Rome, and the fully separate Greek factions in other mods such as Roma Surrectum II, which has Sparta as a separate faction, for example. Europa Barbarorum II combines them, but does its best to make them feel as diverse as possible, as if the player was really leading a bunch of different factions. But how does this work later on in the campaign? How would a loose confederation of city-states go off and conquer the entire Mediterranean? Well, this leads me to the next major aspect of the campaign map gameplay, the reform system. Every faction in the game has reforms that give it access to new units, buildings, etc. Not every faction gets 100% unique reforms. There are certain groups of factions that receive the same or very similar reforms, such as the Hellenistic factions and the Celtic factions. Of course, there are factions that receive unique reforms that are only for that faction, such as the Lugiones, the Koinon Hellenon, Hayastan, Rome, Pahlava, Parthia, etc. These reforms are the in-game representations of the historical development these factions went through over the period of time that the EB2 campaign covers. Taking Hayastan as an example again, you start out with 2 cities that have the Caucasian tribal kingdom building constructed. In order to advance to the next tier of the reforms, you have to construct this building in 4 additional neighboring settlements. This expands the unit roster and allows for the construction of higher-tier native colonies and government buildings. This represents the kingdom's historical development from a minor Achaemenid successor state kingdom to a regional kingdom in its own right. In conjunction to this, you have to reject the annual tribute to the Seleucids and win several battles against them, in addition to taking several settlements, in order to officially break away from this diplomatic arrangement. Eventually, after taking several more settlements, including some specific ones, you can construct the imperial government building. After this, there is a second reform that can trigger based on different events. You need to have the imperial building constructed in the capital Armavir, and you can either have a faction leader with 8 authority, a faction leader with 6 authority in conjunction with having at least 15 settlements, or have at least 21 settlements to trigger this second reform. In addition to all this, there are even other paths you can take. For example, if you've chosen to fight the Seleucids, but you feel as if your kingdom is tired out after you've won 6 battles and taken 2 settlements, you can agree to be forgiven. Keep the new settlements, and renew the old arrangement of paying annual tribute. All of this does an amazing job in terms of immersing the player, since there are so many stories to be written in every single campaign for every single faction. Going back to the Greek cities, another good example of the reforms are those for the Koinon Hellenon. The reforms emphasize that you are initially leading a loose coalition of various city-states and are tied to having different state leaders, which are represented by traits in the game. You can have an Archon of Athens who represents the leader of Athens, an Archon of Ambrakia representing the leader of Ambrakia, etc. I don't want to go through the Koinon Hellenon reforms in great detail as I did above, but the reforms here represent how the coalition develops throughout the campaign. Eventually, it culminates in a Sympoliteia, or a treaty where Greek cities agree to, for all intents and purposes, merge. This is what you strive for when taking command of the Koinon Hellenon. Needless to say, the reforms mechanic in the campaign is great for immersion and really helps create a narrative storyline that is centered not only around your characters, but also around the development of your faction as a whole. Going through the whole reform process for a given faction can be a real achievement and really draws the player in. You can find a link to the guide to the unique reforms for every faction in the description below. Every single building in Europa Barbarorum 2 has a purpose. I have seen others review the game, and some have even complained about buildings doing nothing. This couldn't be further from the truth. In Legend of Total War's video about EB2, he takes a look at the mines building in Italy and sees that the income he'll get from those is pitiful, and then concludes that the mines in EB2 are useless. However, this varies drastically from province to province. Using the Armavir province as an example, the capital province of Hayastan, you begin the campaign with a basic mines building already constructed, and you get over 1,000 or perhaps even about 2,000 gold per turn from this building, whereas the one in the Italian province gave a pittance in comparison and wasn't worth constructing. It just depends on the province, and this also adds to the immersion. You don't just get a ton of money and build everything, like in vanilla Rome Total War or Medieval 2. You have to think about what you can construct. I find this to be refreshing in a Total War game. The trait system in EB2 is also similar to the one in EB1, and also adds a lot to the campaign and the battles. Every character really gets fleshed out here, since they have traits for being the king, the governor of somewhere, an experienced cavalryman, etc. Everyone also has a few traits they start out with that kind of predetermine what they will be good at. For example, you can have someone who starts out with the dull trait. You can already tell from this that he won't be very good at management, and he should focus his efforts on his other skills, especially if he has a hardy constitution. Your characters gain traits based on these basic ones, but they also gain traits and ancillaries based on the buildings of the city they are in. For example, they can get some nice traits and ancillaries from educational buildings or temple complexes, or from how they perform in battles. This very dynamic trait system that has been enhanced a degree not seen in many other mods is another way that EB2 really stands out. Battles in Europa Barbarorum 2 are fairly good, but I wouldn't call them outstanding, especially when compared to other mods that have a greater focus on battles. They are good, don't get me wrong. The units look great and there is a lot of strategy involved. You pretty much have to hold your battle line, skirmish and flank with your cavalry, and pepper the enemy with rocks, arrows, and javelins as much as you can. It's your standard Rome Total War fare. I have actually seen the battle AI freak out at times, sometimes in field battles as well, but it really isn't that surprising for Total War battle AI to freak out. I just explain it away by them having a bad chain of command or a poor general or being overeager soldiers, which is of course historically accurate. Every battle also has a greater meaning here, since units are expensive and it isn't easy to just replenish your troops with a snap of your fingers. You have to choose your fights wisely. I also appreciate the diversity of the units here. Most armies in this period were not uniform, similar-looking troops. There were many auxiliary tribesmen from cultures we know little to nothing about. Units all didn't wear the same thing, and things were in general pretty messy. Europa Barbarorum 2 depicts this to a T. While it does make managing large battles a bit of a headache at times, depending on the faction of course, it really should be tough to manage them. This also adds to the immersion in the game. Again, the battles are good, and there are some amazing units in the mod. It's just not the best mod for someone who plays Total War primarily for the battles. I could keep talking about Europa Barbarorum and its impact on me forever, but I think I will try to wrap things up here. In my opinion, Europa Barbarorum 1 and 2 stand above the other mods for Rome and Medieval 2 for me, due to their absolute unwavering devotion to historical accuracy. The way that EB2 represents so many aspects of the history of every single faction, character, and rebel province in the game is simply unmatched by any other mod for any Total War. For all of the reasons outlined in this review, I give Europa Barbarorum 2 5 stars out of 5. Some may feel like the campaign is a slog, or that the battles are not as clean as those in other mods, but for me, in my humble opinion, Europa Barbarorum 2 is the mod to end all mods, and it's my absolute favorite mod for any Total War game ever made. It's just too bad that the Rome and Medieval 2 engines get older and less compatible with newer systems every year. Thanks for watching. Have a good one. A review of Invasio Barbarorum, Ruina Romae. The massive overhaul of Rome Total War Barbarian Invasion, Invasio Barbarorum, Ruina Romae, was released last year and it definitely deserves some attention. In this video, I'll be reviewing this fantastic mod that leaves the vanilla Barbarian Invasion expansion in the dust, and honestly, in a lot of ways, is better than Attila Total War's take on the fall of the Roman Empire and the Hunnic invasions. Let's get into it. The setting. The campaign begins in 410 AD, which is a very interesting start date. You have several factions to choose from, and all of them offer different playstyles and are interesting in their own right. The Western Roman Empire offers you the standard experience you expect from this time period, and it truly is Ruina Romae at the start. First off, you have the large Gallo-Roman rebel empire to contend with in Gaul. You also have a ton of Visigoth armies to deal with in Italia that are knocking on Rome's door. Your Iberian possessions are in serious trouble due to the presence of Germanic Suebi and Iranian Alan hordes. Add the Huns to all this and you have a real party going on. You have to pick and choose your battles and figure out how you're going to survive. The Eastern Roman Empire is of course in a slightly better position, though it still has to contend with Hunnic invaders and Germanic tribes as well. Additionally, the Eastern Romans have a large established enemy to the east, the Sassanid Persian Empire. Not everything is set in stone for the other large faction in the game, the Sassanids. To the east, they have nomadic incursions to deal with as well, in addition to the large Kushan kingdom. And to the west, you start at war with the down but not out Arsacid kingdom of Armenia. Those are the larger factions that start out on the defensive in Ruina Romae. Of course, the other factions are also playable and offer vastly different experiences. Factions like the Suebi or the Ostrogoths are both trying to survive nomadic incursions and carve their own place in the post-Roman world at the same time, and utilizing your armies to quickly create a large kingdom is key to stabilizing your economy and your new state. The Gallo-Romans have it very tough at the start, having to bear the brunt of several Germanic incursions in addition to the Huns and Alans, while beating back Western Roman attempts to retake Gaul. The kingdom of Armenia has been sort of torn to pieces by war with the Romans and Persians since the rise of the Sassanids, and while you start out with a decently sized kingdom and a good standing army, you're staring down the formidable Sassanids right from the start. The Alans have an interesting start position, with territories in the Caucasus as well as a horde in southern Gaul. Of all the starting positions, the Frankish kingdom seems to have the easiest time, since they are not directly in the line of fire of the Germanic and Hunnic hordes and can bide their time for a short while as the empires fight each other and the hordes. The graphics. There are two areas where I find Ruina Romae and the other Invasio Barbarorum mods really shine graphically. The 2D art and the units. The 2D art in the game is very well done and immersive, making you feel like the game was made from the ground up to represent the late Roman period, compared to Barbarian Invasion, which feels more like a basic mod campaign for the vanilla Rome Total War. Attila Total War, which covers the same sort of period, tries to portray the period in a very dark, apocalyptic way, making it really feel like the start of the Dark Ages. But Ruina Romae actually makes it feel like a new beginning. The map is nice and colorful, and while it is extremely hectic and the opening battles are numerous and pretty epic, it doesn't quite have an apocalyptic feel, which I actually don't mind at all. If you want a campaign of destruction, you have many options, including the Suebi, the Alans, the Visigoths, the Huns, and a few others. If you want a more traditional Total War campaign, where you start out small and with limited resources and have to build up your kingdom, then Ruina Romae provides this experience as well, with the Frankish and Armenian campaigns. If you want the typical Barbarian Invasion experience, where you're trying to hold your empire together in the face of internal instability, Germanic and Hunnic hordes at the same time, then those campaigns are there for you too. The Gallo-Romans await. Variety in gameplay. I've seen a lot of people complain about certain mods recently, since a lot of mods give every faction access to basically every kind of unit. Heavy cavalry, heavy infantry, heavy archers, strong horse archers, etc. The main complaint is that it ruins the standard vanilla feel of Rome Total War, where each faction has clear strengths and weaknesses. In Ruina Romae, it really maintains that feel of each faction having a unique roster with clear strengths and weaknesses. The Alans and Huns are cavalry heavy, and must rely on auxiliaries for infantry support. The empires, of course, have their strengths and weaknesses, but they have the advantage of having tons of provinces with a large pool of auxiliaries to recruit. The Germanic factions, of course, tend to be infantry heavy. In this way, Ruina Romae in a lot of ways maintains the Rome Total War feel, with each faction having clear strengths and weaknesses. Conclusion. Ruina Romae is a mod with a campaign that really changes up the gameplay of Rome Total War. There are so many factions to choose from, so many more than Barbarian Invasion, with diverse and unique unit rosters that give you a very different experience based on who you choose to play as. If you prefer building up your empire slowly, you have a few factions to try, including the Frankish Kingdom and Armenia. If you prefer playing as a barbarian horde and quickly destroying large empires, then the Suebi, Burgundians, Alans, and Huns have you covered. If you want to try your best to survive against unimaginable odds, then you know who to play. In any case, Invasio Barbarorum Ruina Romae is a great mod that looks great and has good and diverse gameplay, both in terms of its battles and on the campaign map. I highly suggest you give it a shot if you want an excellent late Roman period experience. Better than Medieval 2? A review of Chivalry Total War, the mod for Rome Total War. Chivalry Total War was one of the first total conversion mods for Rome Total War, completely transforming the game from its original form to a game about the Middle Ages. There is pretty much nothing in Chivalry that reminds you that this is built on top of a game about the Roman era. Every asset has been changed to immerse you in the medieval era. It was a pretty popular mod back in the day, but of course it faced fierce competition from Medieval 2 Total War once that game released. Does Chivalry Total War still hold up today, and is it worth your time? You'll find out in this review of Chivalry Total War for the original Rome Total War. The campaign. Chivalry's campaign begins in 1071 AD, immediately after the Battle of Manzikert, where the Byzantine Emperor Romanos IV was defeated by the Seljuks. Its start date is a good one, and pretty much every faction has an interesting starting position. You get a lot of variety in Chivalry Total War with this start date. You have powerful, stable, expanding factions like the Seljuks, the French, or the English. You also have small factions that definitely need expert guidance in order to succeed, like the Bohemians, the Pisans, or the Armenians. There is also a very interesting Crusades mechanic in Chivalry Total War. Since the game is based on Rome Total War, there isn't a Crusades mechanic built into the game. But you can basically go on your own crusades to the Levant. You can build an army, hop on your navy, and go conquer the historical Crusader state provinces such as Edessa, Antioch, and Jerusalem, which are victory conditions for many of the European factions anyway. And the way Chivalry has you develop these provinces has depth to it. You can construct buildings that start essentially helping you form the Crusader states and allow you to recruit Hospitaller and Templar Knights, as well as other Crusader-type units, to help you hold and expand these Middle Eastern provinces. It essentially feels like you are running multiple campaigns at once. One where you are fighting to retain and expand your holdings in Europe, and one where you are doing the same in the Middle East, with a completely different roster of units and buildings. It is quite an interesting way of overcoming the limitations of the Rome Total War engine. If you want to play a campaign as a non-Catholic faction, where the Crusader states are already established, then there is a provincial campaign entitled Crusader Epic, which essentially fulfills this role. One of the strongest aspects of Chivalry Total War is its dedication to realism and historicity. Pretty much every aspect of every faction is well fleshed out, from the city models to unit designs to unit rosters to starting positions on the map. Pseudo-historical amalgamations are kept to a minimum, so you won't find any immersion-breaking pseudo-kingdoms like Kingdom of Spain, or a Milan that controls Genoa, or a Super Turks faction here. It's also the only Rome Total War mod that lets you control the Republic of Pisa, which makes me want to start a Let's Play entitled Get Bent. Another important thing to note is that chivalry is basically devoted to the period between the end of the 11th century to the middle of the 13th century. Its scope is a bit more narrow than other mods dedicated to the medieval era, such as Rome Medieval and Medieval 2 Total War itself. The campaign is definitely more slow-paced, as it is tough to conquer and consolidate new regions. There are a plethora of buildings to construct, and no matter where you decide to expand, you'll find something interesting that will grab your attention in this campaign. The battles. The battles in Chivalry feel great. While they don't look as nice as Medieval 2, Rome Total War's engine has a charm and feel to it, which is different from Medieval 2 that I think differentiates it in a few ways. For one, something that annoys me to no end in Medieval 2 is the fact that cavalrymen are connected to the horse model, so cavalry casualties are always glued to their horses, a problem which did not exist in the original Rome Total War, which of course preceded Medieval 2. Another benefit of the Rome Total War engine are the collision mechanics, which I find to be better than Medieval 2's. The cavalry stickiness in Medieval 2 is extremely annoying to me, as it makes micromanaging cavalry a very annoying and necessary task in Medieval 2. This makes the combat in Chivalry feel different and better in some ways than Medieval 2, in my opinion. There are definitely trade-offs. The battles do feel distinctly medieval. Your mounted knights dominate in open field battles with the right support, and sieges feel more interesting than Medieval 2 vanilla. The morale system is definitely more realistic than vanilla Rome or Medieval 2, and your maneuvers are essential in causing a mass rout of the enemy. If there is one complaint, it's that the missile units could use a bit of a boost. But crossbowmen are pretty effective, and perhaps the reason I'm pointing this out is because I've mostly fought lower tier archers and skirmishers. The units also look good. They don't look like they are beyond Rome Total War like some units in Roma Surrectum, but they are quite well designed, and they fit the design of the mod. The graphics. The campaign map is fairly similar in scale to the vanilla Rome Total War map, stopping in Mesopotamia, but it is a good size and scope for the period, and it looks good. The Roma Surrectum Environments patch, which is optional, livens it up a little bit. The battle graphics themselves look nice, and again I recommend applying the Roma Surrectum Environments patch, which improves the vegetation drastically. There are unique models for both the campaign map and battle maps that again transport Rome to the medieval era. Some people aren't fans of the sprites on the campaign map, which are a bit less noticeable than the vanilla type models, since the characters themselves are smaller and a bit harder to see. But these don't bother me. Conclusion. In general, Chivalry Total War is a very strong effort, considering the limitations of the Rome Total War engine. It includes religion mechanics, crusade mechanics, and basically everything a good medieval-era campaign needs. Its factions are diverse and play very differently, both in terms of campaign map starting situations and unit roster strengths and weaknesses. It is flexible in that it has versions that run on both Barbarian Invasion and Alexander, so you can take your pick. Chivalry Total War is definitely a worthy mod to play even now, as its campaign and battles provide a decidedly distinct feel from Medieval 2 Total War. Since I prefer some of the mechanics in Rome Total War, such as its population mechanic as well as its lack of divisions between castle and city settlements, there are some aspects of Chivalry that I enjoy more than even Medieval 2 Total War. And that is why I consider Chivalry to be a great mod for Rome Total War that can be played and enjoyed even now, in 2020, over a decade after the release of Medieval 2. A review of Invasio Barbarorum, Restitutor Orbis. Just a few weeks ago, the Invasio Barbarorum mod team released a beta version of their latest mod, Restitutor Orbis, about the exploits of the exceptional Emperor Aurelian, who, despite his short reign, was able to reunify the Roman Empire after a series of disastrous reigns and rebellions. Much like the other mods in the Invasio Barbarorum series, this mod focuses on the late Roman period, though it takes place in the late 3rd century AD, which is the earliest time period covered by the IB series of mods as far as I know. The setting. The main campaign of Restitutor Orbis starts in 270 BC, with Aurelian just having ascended to the throne. The situation is not quite as dire as it is for the Western Roman Empire in Ruina Romae that begins in 410 AD, but it doesn't look good for the Romans at all. The Roman Empire starts out in complete disarray, with a few barbarian invasions and wars, while having to deal with internal rebellions and the large-scale revolts in the west and east. In the west, in Gaul and Iberia, you have the rebel Gallic Empire, which is probably your most powerful Roman foe. In the east, you have the Palmyrene Empire under the famous Queen Zenobia, which is not quite as stable and has to deal with its own internal problems as well as with its somewhat hostile neighbors to the east. To the east, the war between the Kingdom of Armenia and the young Sassanid Empire rages on, as invasions, counter-invasions, assassinations, and court intrigues are a constant in the struggle between the Persian dynasty of Sassan and the Armenian Parthian Arsacids. In this regard, there are a few small historical inaccuracies that were necessary to improve the gameplay balance. In this period, the Kingdom of Armenia and the Kingdom of Caucasian Iberia were allied in their battles against the Persian Empire, and so the IB team has given Mtskheta, the capital of the Caucasian Iberian Kingdom, to the Armenian Kingdom at the start. It's an understandable compromise. It is an interesting start date to be sure, especially for an IB mod. While there are some barbarian invaders to deal with, such as the Alemanni, there aren't as many hordes here as there are in, say, Ruina Romae or Ultima Gloriam, which starts in 453 AD when the Western Roman Empire is already a shadow of its former self, hardly. In 270, your main issues are dealing with the giant rebellions that rage across the empire when playing as Rome. The battles. IB Restitutor Orbis is not that different from Ruina Romae in terms of its battles. You have a similar assortment of factions here, and they are quite diverse. Even the Roman factions themselves, the Empire itself, the Gallic Empire, and the Palmyrene Empire are quite different from each other. They all have their own strengths and weaknesses. While they have the same core of legionary infantry, they rely on different types of mercenaries and auxiliaries. The Palmyrene Empire has some very powerful cataphract cavalry, while the Gallic Empire relies on more Gallic and Germanic auxiliaries than the standard Roman Empire. Thus, like vanilla, each faction has their own strengths and weaknesses, but can use local auxiliaries to make up for what they lack. I have to say that the units in all the Invasio Barbarorum mods are quite nice looking. They look much better than their vanilla counterparts and really add flavor and graphical polish to the game. Everything looks very clean and crisp, considering they are mods for the original Rome Total War. If graphics are important to you, then Restitutor Orbis will satisfy your desire. Conclusion. IB Restitutor Orbis is an excellent mod about the events that took place during the time of Aurelian, and it captures the seemingly hopelessly divided situation very well. You have to play to the best of your ability to reunite the empire and defeat the large rebel empires. Additionally, the other faction campaigns are also quite interesting, and you have interesting situations all across the map, including the conflict between Sassanid Persia and the Armenians. It is important to note that the Empire Divided campaign in Rome 2 also starts in 270 BC, and is also focused on the exploits of Aurelian. However, it is a bit unfair to compare it to Restitutor Orbis for Rome 1, as they are very different games with very different mechanics. Another modder, inspired by the work of the IB team, made a mod entitled Restitutor Orbis for the Empire Divided campaign in Rome 2, which improves its historical accuracy as well as other things. I will also cover this mod at some point and compare it to Restitutor Orbis for Rome 1. On a surface level, I can state that while the Empire Divided campaign in Rome 2 is good, it is different enough from Restitutor Orbis for Rome 1 that they are difficult to directly compare. And if you have a weaker system that can't run Rome 2, then you can get your Aurelian fix from here and be very satisfied. The mod is still in development, and the team needs your assistance to complete the project. By downloading the beta, which is quite stable and polished for a beta, and providing important feedback, you can help the IB team improve the mod. If you like the late Roman period and the crisis of the 3rd century, give it a try. A review of Bronze Age Total War, the mod for Rome Total War. The Bronze Age is a period that many think will not ever be tackled in the mainline Total War series. Of course, technically, Total War Saga Troy is a game based on a Bronze Age conflict, but it does have several fantasy elements, and is not completely focused on the historical aspects of the time period. Well, luckily, we have the Bronze Age mod for the original Rome Total War to help show us the potential of the time period and the region. Let's get into it. The setting. The campaign begins in 1290 BC, when there were several international powers competing and cooperating with each other throughout the Middle East. The most important powers at the time are featured, including New Kingdom Egypt, Kassite Babylonia, the Hittite Empire, the weakened Mitanni, the upstart Middle Assyrian Kingdom, and the powerful Elamites. There are also other interesting factions included, including the Confederation of the Nairi around Lake Van, the Kashka tribes in Pontus and Bechiria, the Artsauans, and even the Trojans, known in Hittite as Wilusha. All of these factions are fleshed out in Bronze Age, and they all offer a different kind of challenge. The powerful established factions, such as the Kassites and the Egyptians, are strong and have many cities. Other factions, such as the Nairi Confederation, are small and have to expand and consolidate their territories before they can think of challenging the large kingdoms around them. The economy system in Bronze Age is pretty tough. It is difficult to maintain large armies as well as garrisons, and you'll find yourself fighting decisive battles often. You won't be able to spam armies of troops in this mod, especially if you're playing as a smaller faction. I like this aspect of the mod, as in this period a kingdom could not really sustain multiple defeats on the battlefield without either collapsing or losing significant territory in the process. Bronze Age is not perfect in all aspects in terms of immersion. Much of the 2D art remains the same as vanilla Rome Total War, including the character portraits. I do wish we had gotten some unique character portraits, since the depictions of the time are stylistic and interesting. Egypt, of course, can simply continue to use the vanilla Rome Egyptian portraits since they were seemingly designed for this period anyway. The music for the mod is also well done. There are horde factions as well, including the nomads of the Syrian desert and the Sea Peoples. In the late Bronze Age, a lot of the civilizations faced pressure on all sides, with environmental problems, natural disasters, famine, trade breakdowns, internal rebellions, and nomadic incursions. These pressures combined caused most of the kingdoms featured in Bronze Age Total War to collapse around the turn of the 12th century BC. Mitanni fell to Assyria, Kassite Babylon collapsed due to internal conflict and Elamite invasions, Ugarit collapsed due to a Sea People invasion, the Hittites collapsed probably due to a combination of all these factors, Mycenaean Greece was all but wiped out by invaders. The upheaval had a profound impact on the development of several of these civilizations. Greece entered a so-called Dark Age. Babylon was ruled by a succession of kings that ranged from decent to fairly weak. Egypt's new kingdom collapsed. Only Assyria and Elam remained major contenders in this period, and the Nairi consolidated and formed the strong kingdom of Urartu north of Assyria. The battles. The battles in Bronze Age are very interesting. Of course, Cavalry was not really a factor in this time period, while chariots were. It is important to be able to use chariots effectively in this mod, which differentiates it from a lot of other mods. In the two mods I recently reviewed, Chivalry Total War about the medieval era, and Invasio Barbarorum about the late Roman Empire, elite cavalry units often dominate the battlefield. You don't have that luxury in Bronze Age, and you have to make sure you don't get your chariots stuck in melee. They will be destroyed. They are devastating weapons, however, and if used correctly can cause a mass rout of the enemy very quickly. The combat in Bronze Age feels very different from other mods, and for this I applaud it. The modders were able to use the Rome Total War engine to capture the warfare of the Bronze Age as best as possible. A lot of people get upset when the battles in Total War are limited in any way by the period. This goes for Total War Saga Troy as well. The lack of cavalry makes skirmishing and chariot management more important, and it doesn't bother me personally. As a historical player who enjoys when the game is as faithful to the period as possible, I don't have a problem with this approach, and players can definitely adapt to the constraints of the period. Conclusion. Bronze Age Total War puts the spotlight on a time period that has been ignored by the Total War series so far, with the partial exception of Total War Saga Troy, which treats the period as a semi-Iliad-inspired fantasy. Its focus on the ancient Near East is extremely important in my opinion, as Total Wars in general overlook the Middle East, with the exception of Rome 2, which gave the Near East a pretty good attention to detail, all things considered. While the mod is great, its greatest achievement is to show all the untapped potential that lies in the ancient Near East. While the Bronze Age scenario is great, and we get to play as great kingdoms like the Mitanni and the Hittites, there is so much more that can be done with the eras of the ancient Near East. For example, there can be a Sumerian Warring States period beginning in 2400 BC, which can also be called the Rise of Sargon campaign. There can be a Rise of Hammurabi campaign that is based on the warring Amorite states, such as Babylon, Eshnunna, Ekalatum, Larsa, Mari, and others. There can be a late period campaign based on the Neo-Assyrian Empire and the kingdoms of Babylon, Urartu, Elam, Judea, etc. There are just so many options, and the possibilities are incredible. I highly recommend that people try Bronze Age Total War, even if they aren't particularly fans of the era, because it tries its best at portraying a very interesting period of conflict that is a bit outside the mainstream consciousness. If you are not a fan of Bronze Age warfare and absolutely need to have heavy cavalry in your armies, then this mod will not be for you. But if you have an open mind about the period, you'll have a lot of fun. Give it a shot and leave feedback for the team. A review of Invasio Barbarorum, Ultra Gloriam Romae, a mod for Rome Total War. Ultra Gloriam Romae is another mod in the Invasio Barbarorum series of mods for the original Rome Total War. In terms of its place within Invasio Barbarorum, it's the mod with the campaign that starts at the latest date, 463 AD. It is a campaign where the Western Roman Empire is in complete shambles, and rebuilding it would take a Herculean effort. Meanwhile, the Sassanid Empire in the east is growing more and more powerful, and is increasingly becoming an existential threat to the Eastern Empire, though the situation there is much less dire. In this review, we'll take a look at all the aspects of the mod and see if it's up to the task of portraying this fascinating era. Spoiler alert! Despite the apocalyptic feeling you get when playing this mod as the Western Roman Empire especially, it is absolutely epic and hilarious at the same time. The setting. Invasio Barbarorum Ultra Gloriam Romae has two campaigns, the default one that begins in 463 AD and a provincial campaign that starts in 434 AD. Personally, I find the later start date, 463, to be more interesting. You take control of the Western Roman Empire in its death throes as the rather weak emperor Libius Severus. You start out with a couple of armies and an economy that's okay. A few of your cities have low public order in the north and south. You go to recruit some units, and what do you see? Huge upkeep costs. Basically, you have to recruit and disband as necessary, or just use what you have at the start, which isn't much. In 463, the Western Romans are staring defeat in the face in the form of internal instability, constant Vandal attacks from the southwest, the Ostrogothic kingdom in the northeast, the Burgundians in the northwest, and the Visigoths in Gaul and Iberia. Ultra Gloriam Romae really allows you to visualize how much the Roman Empire had declined. You basically control a rump state that is comprised of most of Italy, and that's about it. Your enemies are more powerful and have more stable kingdoms in general. In the east, things are not quite as grim. The Eastern Roman Empire has several rich provinces, including Egypt, Asia Minor, Syria, Greece, and Thrace, and the Hunnic threat has been mostly pacified. The Sassanid Persians are the main foes that the Eastern Romans face in this mod, and they are formidable with their powerful cataphracts, able to outfight most of the cavalry the Romans can muster. The map is smaller than the ones in Ruina, Romae, and Restitutor Orbis, which I am okay with. Those mods also try to portray the conflicts the Sassanids had on their eastern front, but since this mod is definitely more focused on Rome, it feels like a proper scope for the map here. Having played so many mods with giant maps, however, it does feel just a tad cramped. The 434 campaign is also quite interesting, as you have interesting figures such as Emperor Valentinian III and the famous General Flavius Aetius on the campaign map. The Western Empire is still not quite dying yet here, and there are definitely more rays of hope. Though the threats are still many, of course. The Vandal invasion of North Africa threatens to cut off a major source of the Western Empire's food supply, and the Burgundian and Hunnic attacks in Gaul are simply crushing. 434 AD is when Attila took power, so good luck with that. The graphics in Ultra Gloriam Romae are a mixed bag in my opinion. A lot of the units, 2D art, and loading screens don't seem quite as good as those found in Ruina Romae and Restitutor Orbis. However, everything still looks quite good for a Rome Total War mod. This mod has its own sound mod included for both the music and the voices, which is great and really changes it up from vanilla Rome Total War and Barbarian Invasion and other mods that use the vanilla music and sounds. I have to say that the music included is absolutely hilariously epic and over the top at times. I personally think it's great. I even think I heard some Pirates of the Caribbean music in there during a battle. The sound mod for the voices is also great. The battles. Much like the other Invasio Barbarorum mods, Ultra Gloriam Romae has good-looking units, but they don't look quite as polished as those in the other IB mods I've played. The battle mechanics are also pretty similar to the other IB mods. IB battles tend to be more fast and furious than battles in mods such as Roma Surrectum, SPQR, and Europa Barbarorum, and I find this to be a nice change of pace. Not every mod should have this exact same battle system and mechanics. As I get older, I definitely prefer faster, more action-packed battles, and the IB mods, including Ultra Gloriam Romae, deliver these in droves. Combined with the epic music and sound mod for the sounds of battle, I think I've enjoyed the battles in Ultra Gloriam Romae more than any mod I've played recently. Take a look and listen here.
I'll slice your kill you!
Conclusion. While there are some aspects of Ultra Gloriam Romae that don't seem quite as polished to me as they are in other Invasio Barbarorum mods, the campaigns in Ultra Gloriam Romae, especially the default one that begins in 463 AD, are great and feel quite epic. When combined with the somewhat over-the-top soundtrack and sound mod, it makes it feel like this mod in particular is what Barbarian Invasion should have been. The somewhat unpolished 2D graphics and loading screens almost add to its charm. The Western Roman Empire is dying, and you have to save it by crushing the overwhelming armies of Rome's foes with your tiny armies and unmatched tactics. Just go download Ultra Gloriam Romae and be entertained. A review of the vanilla enhancement mod for Rome Total War. One of the newest major mods on the Rome Total War scene, Ahowl 11's vanilla enhancement mod does not try to make Rome Total War into something it's not. While mods such as Europa Barbarorum or Extended Cultures stretch the Rome Total War engine to its limits in terms of what it can do, vanilla enhancement has been built from the ground up utilizing Rome Total War modding wisdom and knowledge that has been built up for the last 16 years in order to preserve both the stability and essence of the vanilla game while enhancing it in every way possible, in the vein of other mods that try to keep the vanilla style of the game, like the venerable Extended Greek mod or the newer Barbarian Empires. One of the distinguishing features of the vanilla enhancement mod is its campaign map. It is definitely a step above the vanilla map in terms of size, scope, and accuracy, but unlike many other mods, it does not extend to Central Asia and parts of India. Several mods extend the map to that region in order to include Bactria and sometimes a Saka faction, but of course doing so takes the focus of the campaign itself away from the Mediterranean. While the map does extend to the other side of the Caspian Sea, which is absolutely necessary in order to include Parthia in its historical starting position, it does not go beyond that, and I think that is one major factor that differentiates Vanilla Enhancement's campaign from others. Of course, there are mods that take this Mediterranean focus to an extreme, but Vanilla Enhancement provides a good balance between focus and scope. This is indicative of Vanilla Enhancement's main strength. It balances the focus and scope of the campaign in a way not many other mods have done. Additionally, several new provinces have been added. Settlement and province names have been altered to be more historically accurate. Most of these changes are pretty simple ones, fixing the blatant errors of the vanilla game, such as making the Macedonian capital Pella instead of Thessalonica, or the Armenian capital Armavir instead of Artaxata. Of course, the most major change is the starting position of Parthia, which is actually present on the map in Vanilla Enhancement. However, the new and altered regions are also welcome. Vanilla Rome simply has too few settlements in some locations, especially when compared to other regions that are packed with cities, making the map a bit unbalanced. This issue has been mitigated in Vanilla Enhancement, and the game is definitely more balanced, so you won't see the Seleucids getting wiped out by Ptolemaic Egypt every single time very quickly anymore. The game in general has been made much more historically accurate. However, it is not taken to an extreme like in Europa Barbarorum. The Bronze Age Egyptians have been replaced by the real Ptolemaic Empire. The more cartoony feeling units, I'm looking at you, Eastern Infantry, have been removed or reskinned to look more realistic, while retaining the color scheme of vanilla. The map extension allows for Parthia to have a more accurate starting position that actually makes some semblance of sense. All of these features increase the immersion factor of the campaign. Another standout feature of Vanilla Enhancement is its recruitment system. The vanilla recruitment system isn't quite as realistic as it could be. Many mods devoted to historical accuracy often attach unit recruitment to some other type of building, such as government buildings, inns, markets, or even religious structures, depending on the mod. Such systems are present in mods such as Europa Barbarorum, Chivalry Total War, and many others. Vanilla Enhancement ties recruitment to a simple and easy-to-understand colony-style recruitment system, which is not as complex as those found in other mods, like Extended Cultures 5. In this way, recruitment remains as straightforward as it is in vanilla, but it is also done in a more realistic way, again finding that balance between historicity and vanilla gameplay that so many people want. In future versions, this system is going to be simplified even more, so stay tuned for the upcoming versions. In terms of the battles in the mod, they again change up the vanilla battle system a little bit, but don't take it to an extreme like Roma Surrectum, SPQR, or Europa Barbarorum. Battles are a bit slower than vanilla, and you have to be more methodical, but they don't take an hour like battles in Roma Surrectum, and the speed of running and combat has not been slowed to a crawl, or noticeably. This is not a knock on other mods that have longer battles, it's just that Vanilla Enhancement again tries and succeeds in striking that balance between the more extreme modifications and the vanilla game. I actually prefer battles where the combat is a bit faster, like in Shogun 2, but in vanilla unmodded Rome the combat is a bit too fast for me, and slowing it down is absolutely necessary in my opinion. The economy system has definitely been made more difficult to manage than in vanilla Rome. At the start, every faction really needs to consider its opening moves well, in order to effectively start building their economies, thus allowing them to strengthen their armies. Many of the smaller factions start out with horrible economies, so the beginning of the campaign is pretty hectic in terms of acquiring new lands and stabilizing the economy, which is pretty similar to vanilla in some respects, depending on the faction, and is reminiscent of Europa Barbarorum, where many smaller factions start out with a deficit. This makes the early campaign quite hectic with the smaller factions, but it is quite fun and I actually like it. It's quite different from mods like many in the Invasio Barbarorum series, where many of the larger empires start out with huge territories and armies, but their economies are collapsing. It's pretty much the opposite of that. I suppose I would prefer it if it was more like the economy system in Chivalry Total War, where even the smallest faction begins with a small surplus, but it is very difficult to grow your economy and you really have to build in order to make your kingdom viable in the long run. But the economy system here is also well done and challenging in a way that doesn't stray too far from the vanilla game. The graphics in Vanilla Enhancement are quite nice, again striking the balance between vanilla and mods with total graphical overhauls like Roma Surrectum that take a toll on performance. The units in particular are good looking and again improve the historical accuracy of the game without taking the vanilla feel away from the factions. Some have stated that there are too many additional units and this takes away from the individuality of each faction, but in my opinion each player can choose the way they want to construct their faction's armies in vanilla anyway, and I don't think this takes away from the gameplay. It just gives you more strategic options and more units to try out with any of the factions in the game, which I find to always be a very fun part of any Total War game. Of course, the factions remain very distinct, as they are in vanilla, just with an access to a bevy of new and excellent looking units. The culture system is also something that should be mentioned. Since Vanilla Enhancement utilizes the Rome Total War Alexander engine, it takes advantage of the religion system that was introduced in Barbarian Invasion in order to add more visible cultures to the game, so that provinces can have a dominant culture but be converted over time, which also has an impact on the recruitment system. This of course adds another layer to the campaign gameplay that was missing in the original Vanilla Rome Total War, but of course was added in its expansions. In conclusion, I'd say that Vanilla Enhancement is one of the most exciting mods for the original Rome Total War right now. It is essentially trying to be a Rome Total War 1.5, including all the improvements and historical accuracy that we have come to expect, while retaining the sort of creative assembly style we have come to know from them. One of the main reasons Vanilla Enhancement is such a good mod to play now in 2020 is that it's currently in active development. Its creator is working hard on subsequent versions and is always ready to take the feedback of players seriously. Give Vanilla Enhancement a shot and leave feedback in order to help improve the mod even more. You can find a link to the Discord of the Rome Total War modding community, where you can interact with the developer of this mod and many others for the original Rome Total War in the description below. Thanks for watching. The most underrated Medieval 2 mod. A review of Chivalry 2, the Sicilian Vespers. One of my favorite mods for Medieval 2 Total War has to be Chivalry 2, the Sicilian Vespers, a mod that I haven't talked about yet, and a mod that I haven't played in quite a while. It has unfortunately been dead for a number of years now, which is why I neglected to mention it in my video about the top 5 mods to play for Medieval 2 in 2020. However, I re-downloaded it and fired it up recently in order to see if my nostalgia for Chivalry 2 was just due to rose-tinted glasses, or if it really was that great. Let's get into it. Chivalry 2 is sort of a successor to Chivalry Total War, the best medieval total conversion mod for Rome Total War. In some ways, it is a more complete mod than Chivalry. The original Chivalry ended up covering the 11th to approximately 13th centuries, a sort of early era campaign. Chivalry 2, based on the Medieval 2 engine, has a few advantages. Like Chivalry 1, Chivalry 2 is inspired by the original Medieval Total War in terms of its design, which is definitely one of the reasons I like it so much. Like the original Medieval, and unlike Medieval 2, Chivalry 2 contains several era campaigns: early, high, late, and even a Dark Age campaign that begins in 888 AD, and a Renaissance era campaign that starts in 1401. The early campaign begins in the standard 1080. The high campaign starts when the Byzantines have lost Constantinople and are split into the Nicaean Empire, Trapezuntine Empire, and Despotate of Epirus, and the late campaign starts in 1311 with the Paleologan restoration of the Byzantine Empire. The really early campaign that begins in 888 AD is a very nice inclusion, as it provides a very different balance of power. At that time, Orthodox factions like the Byzantine Empire and Armenia were more powerful than they are in the later era campaigns, and the Abbasid Caliphate is the powerful Islamic faction in the east, not counting Egypt here, as opposed to the Seljuks. The Renaissance campaign that begins in 1401 is also an excellent addition, as it gives players the chance to play around with the more advanced units in the tech tree that they oftentimes don't get to utilize in critical situations, since the game is already in the bag at that point of the campaign. There are even several factions that are not included in any other mod that I know of anyway, including the Angevin Kingdom of Naples, the County of Anjou, and several others. The mod even has an ingenious system that allows it to circumvent the faction limit of Medieval 2 and include a few more factions, by utilizing the launcher to swap between factions that don't exist in one era with another major faction that did exist. For example, in the Dark Age, early, high, and late campaigns, Armenia is a playable faction, but since the kingdom was destroyed in 1375, it can't be playable in the Renaissance 1401 campaign, so when you specify in the launcher that you want to play the Renaissance campaign, it will automatically change around some files and swap out Armenia for the Kingdom of Georgia. This goes for a few other factions as well, and it is truly an ingenious solution devised by the excellent lead developer Sicilian Vespers that allows Chivalry 2 to stand out from the crowd. Playing as the Byzantine Empire with the 1401 start date is quite interesting, as you're surrounded by the Ottomans, so that is an interesting campaign I can recommend for those who like a challenge. The High Era Byzantine campaign is also interesting, since a major faction, the Latin Empire, controls Constantinople, and like the original Medieval Total War, you control Nicaea, Epirus, and Trebizond, all three of the Byzantine successor states that fractured and became independent upon the loss of Constantinople. While it is a bit ahistorical to have them all politically united in this way, I'll forgive it due to nostalgia for the original Medieval Total War. The original Chivalry Total War, the medieval era Rome Total War mod, placed a heavy focus on economy management and building. In Chivalry, In order to succeed, you had to build up your kingdom in order to support the armies necessary to defend yourself and attack enemy factions. Conquering settlements that were not historically of interest to your faction and outside its AOR is also very difficult to manage in the original Chivalry. The same is true in Chivalry 2. It is quite difficult to go against history in this mod, and if you have historical knowledge about the medieval era, it will definitely help you during the campaign. This is similar to mods like Europa Barbarorum and its sequel as well, where it definitely helps to have historical knowledge and not make a beeline for the Baltic when playing as the Kingdom of Macedon, for example. The map itself is based off of the vanilla map, so the scope and scale is the same as vanilla, but it adds and changes settlements and the settlement balance in order to make the campaign more historical. It also improves the gameplay quite a bit. For those that like the vanilla Medieval 2 map, which in my view was fine, Chivalry 2 delivers by keeping it, but enhancing it in every way possible. Chivalry 2 also adds a garrison script, which, unfortunately, is due to the AI's incompetence at properly protecting its cities and castles. This script is very forward-thinking, since, of course, this concept was included in future Total Wars. It definitely makes you think twice before trying to capture a large enemy fortress with a small raiding party. In conclusion, Chivalry 2, the Sicilian Vespers, is definitely one of my personal favorite Total War mods of all time. It includes 5 different era campaigns, with its Dark Age and Renaissance campaigns really adding something different to this mod. Unfortunately, the Renaissance campaign is technically beta, but it is fully playable. Its bevy of new factions tailored for each era campaign just adds a fantastic amount of replayability, and all of them have the depth and unit rosters to back up their inclusion. Additionally, since it does not have any major graphical overhaul or enhancement, it does not negatively impact performance, unlike other mods, and this may be an important factor to consider for a lot of people who would like to try out mods for Medieval 2, but lack the hardware for some of the more intense mods. Even though it has not been actively developed for a number of years now, Chivalry 2 still deserves attention due to its variety, improved campaign and battle mechanics, and very interesting and diverse campaigns it has to offer. You can find its subforum on Total War Center, where you can download it in the description below. Thanks for watching. A review of Vanilla Beyond, the mod for Medieval 2 Total War. Medieval 2 sure does have a lot of mods. Many of the major ones are unfortunately rather difficult to run if you don't quite have the hardware or technical know-how to squeeze every last bit of performance out of your PC and programs. This mod, Vanilla Beyond, is a mod that is essentially an enhanced version of the vanilla game, which tries to bring out the best that Medieval 2 has to offer without completely overhauling and making the game unrecognizable and difficult to run. Let's get into it. In terms of the setting of the game, nothing has really changed. You still start in 1080 AD, and the pace of the campaign is very reminiscent of vanilla, going until the early Renaissance period and the discovery of America. However, you will immediately notice several changes. There are quite a few new units, buildings, and factions added to the game that really add more flavor to the campaign. Additionally, the map has been expanded to a large degree, going all the way to Mongolia in the east, and including more of the Americas than vanilla. The additional factions included in Vanilla Beyond are also worthy of note, as they are all interesting and add flair to its campaign. In the Americas, the Aztecs and the Apache are playable factions. In the Old World, the Mongols are present on the map from the start, and you'll receive messages periodically regarding their expansion and unification of the Mongol tribes. As a historical player, I am not a huge fan of the playable Apache that expand and create an empire violently like that, but I do like certain changes like having the Mongols visible on the map from the very start. I am not a huge fan of spawning forces on the edge of the map. There are also other interesting playable factions, such as the Emirate of Damascus, the Abbasid Caliphate, the Khwarezmians, the Armenians, the Norwegians, and others. It's definitely a fun group of additional factions that are included in Vanilla Beyond. America is reachable from turn 1 in this mod. Of course, you don't have to sail to America that early if you don't want to. The point of this change was to make the Americas a little more important in the campaign in general, especially since it didn't really have a major impact and was more of just a small endgame challenge to go for if you wanted to in Vanilla Medieval 2. Additionally, the inclusion of the Apache as a major faction in North America does change things up a bit and makes it interesting. As I mentioned above, the map extends eastward all the way to Karakorum, and the Mongols are visible on the map from the very start. The Mongol invasions work differently, since they don't just randomly spawn. As they conquer provinces, they gain extra bonuses and cash that cause a sort of snowball effect, which I find to be a better mechanic than simply spawning 20 stacks somewhere that you can do nothing about. Vanilla Beyond also has some interesting religious mechanics that I think make it stand out a bit more than other vanilla enhancement mods for Medieval 2. For example, a Protestant Reformation event will occur randomly between 1417 and 1517, and Catholic factions will have the opportunity at that time to convert to Protestantism, really changing up the gameplay if you choose to convert. Additionally, Judaism is included in the mod, and Jewish buildings can be constructed for certain benefits while causing some disorder due to religious conversion. The mod is not intended to be a fully 100% historically accurate mod. It is definitely meant to emphasize and enhance the vanilla game in a way that plays to Medieval 2's strengths and mitigates its weaknesses. And in that, it definitely succeeds. There are many aspects of Medieval 2 that don't play a major part in the vanilla campaign since they either occur very late in the campaign or are somewhat underwhelming like the Mongol invasions. In Vanilla Beyond, pretty much everything is meant to actually have a big impact on the experience, and for this I applaud the developer, Azumi. I have to be honest, when I first tried Vanilla Beyond, I didn't expect to be that impressed, because I am definitely a guy that prefers a more historical campaign. However, I have to say I was pleasantly surprised by just how fun and dynamic Vanilla Beyond's campaign is. Its factions are interesting and diverse, and its new units and buildings add flavor to the otherwise vanilla-feeling campaign. It truly takes the interesting aspects of the vanilla campaign and brings them to the forefront, really bringing out the best in Medieval 2. Unlike other mods, and vanilla to an extent, combat is not very sluggish, and battles are pretty epic and fast and furious. All in all, I quite enjoy Vanilla Beyond, and if you want a campaign that isn't going to take forever and is going to encompass all of the Middle Ages covered in the vanilla campaign in one go, including the Protestant Reformation and the European discovery of the Americas, then Vanilla Beyond is a mod you want to try out. It truly feels like a refreshed version of Vanilla Medieval 2, and I like it quite a bit. You can find a link to the Vanilla Beyond subforum in the description below. Thanks for watching. A review of Wars of the Gods, Ancient Wars, the mod for Rome 2 Total War. Wars of the Gods is one of the largest overhaul mods out there for Total War Rome 2. It is a sort of spiritual successor to the previous compilation mods put together by Toon Total War in years past, the all-in-one mods for Shogun 2 and Napoleon. However, I would say that this mod is an even larger effort than those mods. It includes overhauls to all aspects of the game, including the graphics, the gameplay, the campaign, the economy, the battles, the units, the buildings. Everything looks and feels very different when compared to vanilla. When you first start up Wars of the Gods, you'll notice that all factions are playable. This is a very cool addition, especially considering that every faction has been given some attention and really feel fleshed out. This is true for all the campaigns, somewhat surprisingly, which is very impressive indeed. Additionally, It's not as if units and buildings have been added willy-nilly, with no thought given to historical progression and preserving faction uniqueness. There is a lot to be said here about how much thought has gone into every faction unit roster, building chain, and technology tree. The other thing you'll notice when you dive into the campaign as any faction is that the 2D art and UI has been completely overhauled. I have to say that prior to trying out Wars of the Gods, I didn't dislike the Rome 2 UI and 2D art as much as a lot of people did. I find the stylized art to be okay, even though the sort of Greek black art style of the unit cards is a bit jarring, especially when playing as non-Greco-Roman factions. I definitely don't like the Rome 2 stylized 2D art nearly as much as the art in Shogun 2, for example, which I feel is leagues better in every regard. The original Rome style is also, in my opinion, better. Again, this is not to say that the Rome 2 style is bad, it just, in my opinion, could have been a lot better. The other downside of the Rome 2 style is that everything, in the end, feels a bit flat and lifeless, which is unfortunate. This was a period where a lot was colorful, and the statues, walls, paintings with amazing colorful artwork in almost every aspect of life. But Rome 2 almost makes things feel colorless or sanitized. You'll immediately notice that Wars of the Gods rectifies this with its colorful but still somewhat stylized unit cards, building icons, and other UI elements. This is such a refreshing change, and I really like what they've done in this department. They have definitely breathed new life into Rome 2. Battles in Wars of the Gods are quite fun and have been tweaked in a few different ways. They have been slowed down, but not to the degree of some mods like Roma Surrectum or Europa Barbarorum. Bran MacBorn, famous for his AI mods and tweaks for several Total War games and mods as well, has done extensive work in this department, and his AI improvements help the AI a lot, especially in terms of flanking and responding to the actions of the player. I am actually a fan of the battles in vanilla Rome 2, especially when compared to the extremely fast battles of vanilla Rome Total War, but they are definitely improved in Wars of the Gods and are not slowed down too much either. The way combat looks and plays out in terms of the matched combat animations has also been improved noticeably. A quick note about unit rosters. I know there are a lot of people who enjoy having smaller, more focused rosters that make factions feel different from each other. I would say that even though Wars of the Gods adds a ton of new units to the game, they don't detract from the uniqueness of each faction's unit roster. And in fact, I think the units included in Wars of the Gods are really fantastic, both on the low end and high end. Gone are the generic units, such as Eastern Infantry, in favor of more interesting, dynamic, unique, and developing unit rosters that, like in historically accurate mods for Rome Total War, reflect the historical development each faction underwent during this period. For example, the Eastern Kingdoms start out simply as Achaemenid successor states with Achaemenid-type units, but as you advance further in the building and tech trees, your unit roster evolves and you get access to more unique units, reflecting how much your faction has distanced itself from its initial state at the start of the campaign. In terms of campaign gameplay, things are definitely very different when compared to vanilla Rome 2. Things are more dynamic, with larger armies running around and a very aggressive AI. The AI is definitely not passive in Wars of the Gods, that's for sure. At the start of the campaign, you have to get to work on diplomacy and making alliances immediately, or else you might find yourself quickly overwhelmed, depending on the faction you choose. The campaign gameplay is definitely the part that's most reminiscent of Darth mods, since it favors huge armies and battles much more than vanilla or some of the other major overhauls like Divide et Impera or Europa Barbarorum, or Ancient Empires for Attila, for that matter. It's definitely more Invasio Barbarorum than Europa Barbarorum in terms of the amount and size of armies running around. This makes it personally not the mod for me, but for those that appreciate a more dynamic campaign from the start rather than a slow, construction-focused, building-up campaign, Wars of the Gods is for you. One of the best parts of Wars of the Gods is its customizability. For me, personally, the default settings for Wars of the Gods are a bit too much like default Darth Mod Empire, with an economy system that is a bit too easy to manage for my taste. There's simply, in my estimation, a bit too much money going around. However, this is where the strength of Wars of the Gods comes in. For players like me, there is a hard economy optional download that makes the economy management more difficult and reduces the budget you have to work with in general. There are several different options for various aspects of the game, including the People of Rome edition that adds a population mechanic, and several other kinds of tweaks, depending on the preference of the player. Rome 2 is a very large game, with several DLC campaigns. I don't own all of the DLC. I have Caesar and Gaul, Wrath of Sparta, and Empire Divided, but not Rise of the Republic or Hannibal at the Gates, so I can't test out how Wars of the Gods affects all the different campaigns. However, I have to say that it is incredibly impressive that this mod overhauls every aspect of the game, including all of the different campaigns. This definitely gives this mod a leg up over some of its competitors in terms of being a jack-of-all-trades overhaul mod for Rome 2. Rome 2 is a game that I haven't talked too much about on the channel, except in my Total War tier list video, but I don't dislike it. I even think that unmodded, it's a solid game, even better than vanilla original Rome Total War. Now, does that mean I think it's perfect, or as good as it could have been? No, not at all. I definitely think there were several things, especially the launch, that could have been improved significantly, both in terms of gameplay and aesthetics. I'm looking at you, giant settlements. Wars of the Gods really takes Rome 2 to the next level in terms of the graphical style, immersion, and the gameplay, really improving the depth of the game in pretty much every aspect. In conclusion, I have to say that Wars of the Gods is an excellent total overall modification of Rome 2. At the start of making this review, I approached Wars of the Gods like one of the old all-in-one compilation mods, but it really is its own beast. Every faction in every campaign is playable. For a game with as many large campaigns as Rome 2, that is an incredible feat. Every tech tree, every unit roster, every building chain, all of it has been overhauled, including the 2D art and graphics. The gameplay, including the battles and the campaign, has also been overhauled in order to be a bit more deliberate, though not as slow as a mod like Europa Barbarorum, or with the same eye for historical development. While I wouldn't say everything in the campaign has been designed with the care of a mod like Europa Barbarorum or Divide et Impera, that is definitely a differentiating factor, and every game can really turn out differently due to the way the campaign has been balanced. In the end, Wars of the Gods is a massive, excellent mod that deserves your full attention, especially since it is still in active development, and things can be changed based on player feedback. I give Wars of the Gods my full recommendation, with the hard economy and more field battles optional add-ons, of course. It's not the perfect mod for me personally again. Even with the hard economy add-on, I find that there is a bit too much money floating around, and too many huge armies as a result from the immediate beginning. But for players that enjoy those types of mods with a lot of epic battles, this mod will deliver in droves. I don't dislike those types of mods at all, they're just not exactly what I'm looking for personally, as a player that enjoys building up my empire slowly, perhaps due to my roots as a civilization player. I am planning on doing a Let's Play eventually in order to showcase this excellent mod's gameplay in more depth, so stay tuned for that. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. A review of Divide et Impera for Total War Rome 2. Divide et Impera is perhaps the most famous mod for Total War Rome 2, and it definitely deserves a lot of praise. It adds a slew of new mechanics to the game that increase the immersion factor. It has slowed down and retooled the battle system to be more realistic, and it has overhauled many aspects of the graphics and UI in order to really change the feel of the game. Divide et Impera has even been called the Europa Barbarorum of Rome 2. But does it live up to all the hype? Before getting into the review, I want to stress that everything here is of course just my personal opinion, and I'm not saying I'm objectively right. It's just how I feel about it. I suppose I'll start off this review by talking about the changes to the campaign. And these changes are indeed extensive. I suppose the most basic change is that at the beginning of the campaign, for most factions, your kingdom is really not developed, and you have to spend a lot of time utilizing your funds to build up the economy and military that you want. While in Rome 2, you're kind of shoehorned into choosing certain buildings and techs from the beginning based on your faction's unique abilities and your starting position, Divide et Impera really gives you more choices and it feels great to have them. I am personally more of a builder type player, and I really enjoy building up my kingdom from scratch. Again, influence from playing Civilization. And Divide et Impera obliges, requiring you to really spend a lot of time thinking about what to construct so that you have plenty of training sites, public order boosting buildings, and economy boosting buildings. The first turn is quite interesting, and your choices in your first turn can really shape that particular campaign experience for you, especially considering the amount of buildings you have to choose from. I really am a fan of the economy management in Divide et Impera. I actually like it more than other mods like Europa Barbarorum, due to the fact that even smaller factions start out with a budget and somewhat of a surplus. One of the frustrating parts of EB and other tough economy mods for the original Rome Total War and even Medieval 2 is that smaller factions often start out with serious budget deficits that require you to, every time starting up a new campaign as them, quickly conquer and fight several battles before you are able to settle down and actually build up your kingdom. This is not the case in Divide et Impera, and I find that this is an excellent and refreshing change. While economy management is not easy in Divide et Impera by any means, you at least have the budget from the start to actually build your kingdom and choose the way you want to play the campaign. When a building-focused, slow-paced mod forces you to quickly conquer a slew of territories right from the start as a destitute faction, in order to just have a small budget or even break even, it just feels a bit immersion-breaking and jarring to me, so I really appreciate the improved economy mechanics in Divide et Impera. The RPG elements in terms of general and army upgrade trees have also been enhanced and expanded upon to a large degree. I don't dislike the RPG trait system in Rome 2, though I feel that it is much worse than the system from Shogun 2 in many respects. Don't get me started on the laughably bare-bones trait system in Empire and Napoleon. However, Divide et Impera really enhances the trait system a lot, and makes the several available trait trees and their effects more realistic, believable, distinct, and less gamey. I really like how a lot of the traits have an effect on suppressing the province's local banditry in particular. It feels like something a general might gain with more experience. The same goes for the buildings. There are way more buildings to choose from, and their effects are so varied and helpful that you really don't feel shoehorned into choosing particular buildings. The buildings you construct can all be helpful depending on the kind of kingdom you want to build up, in terms of both the economy and the military. One of the best, most standout features of Divide et Impera is its population mechanic. Rome 1, in my opinion, had a very nice population mechanic where recruiting and disbanding troops actually had an effect on the local population of that province. However, it was definitely simplistic. Rome 2 Vanilla, of course, has no population mechanic at all, which is terrible and is somewhat immersion-breaking in my opinion. Divide et Impera solves this by including a nuanced, interesting population mechanic that really increases immersion and strategic options during the campaign. There are different population groups for each faction, including a low-tier peasant-type class. The names of these classes are all different depending on the faction. A middle tier, an upper nobility tier, and a foreigner class. All of these populations have an impact on the campaign, since the units you recruit draw from certain elements of the population depending on the type of unit it is. For example, a unit of royal cataphracts will draw from the upper nobility. A unit of medium infantry will draw from the mid-tier population, and basic levy units will be drawn from the peasant or lower class population of that particular region. You also have to consider the population of your opponent's provinces, since when you conquer an enemy province, its population is, for you, comprised entirely of foreigners. Since your troops will require the appropriate type of population in order to replenish, you will have to consider this fact, as if you lose a lot of native troops, you will have to retreat in order to replenish them. Of course, there are also plenty of units made up of foreigners, so this is a way Divide et Impera encourages you to have mixed armies as you expand further and further, which is excellent and prevents spamming of particular types of armies with the same units, which of course can get boring over time. You can only love Eastern infantry so much. Divide et Impera also includes a reforms system that unlocks certain units as you progress through the campaign, which encourages you to keep pressing onward in your campaign. You really become attached to your save games in Divide et Impera, which is really a phenomenal feeling in a Total War game. There is also a great supply system included that is somewhat similar to the way Europa Barbarorum handled campaigns outside your own territory, and is kind of like a toned-down version of the pretty extreme supply system in ancient empires, which I find to be a bit too restrictive at times for my taste personally. It is an excellent system that really adds another layer to the game and requires you to keep track of the fertility of your provinces, how much supply your province has, or your opponent's province has, your baggage train units that are kind of like a mobile way of supplying your troops and make your armies require less supplies from the local province, and you have to think about where it's prudent to construct supply depot buildings that will increase that province's supplies and allow you to have larger armies in that area and campaign against your nearby foes more easily. It also gives you another factor to consider when deciding when to declare war or not. You have to take into account your manpower and how well you can retrain and resupply your troops, not just how many troops you have at the time. This, of course, also really hinders the ability to undertake historically ridiculous massive migration campaigns where you sail from Egypt to Britain, since navies also have supplies and cannot sail too far without taking attrition. While such campaigns are fun indeed, they shouldn't be possible in a mod that strives for historical realism. The battles in Divide et Impera are quite fun. They are reminiscent of Europa Barbarorum 1 battles, but I find that they are a bit faster. I really appreciate the range of vision your troops have and how easy it is for enemy soldiers fleeing the battle to escape and hide in wooded areas where it would be difficult to detect and track them. While it feels good to run down 100% of an enemy army after forcing a mass rout, it is definitely more historical and realistic to not be able to run down and slaughter 100% of an enemy army after causing a mass rout. I like the morale mechanics in Divide et Impera, and troops, especially low-quality troops, will definitely break after taking a certain percentage of casualties and if they are in a poor position strategically. For example, if they are flanked or facing a larger number of troops. Battles are definitely slower than Rome 2 vanilla, but I don't find them to be as slow as Europa Barbarorum, which I find to be a good thing, as sometimes battles in EB can feel like a slog, especially siege battles. Divide et Impera gives you enough time to enjoy the visuals of a battle, while not forcing you to fast forward for the last 20 minutes of a battle while you try and fail to take down the last levy pikeman. Thus, I personally feel like the Divide et Impera battles are balanced just a bit better than the more extreme mods like Europa Barbarorum and others. The animations also don't look like they've been slowed down to a crawl like in some other mods, which is definitely a point I would put in DEI's favor. One of the problems I have with a lot of Total War games and mods is the generic nature of particular units. When you have armies entirely composed of Eastern infantry, Eastern archers, and an Eastern general, when you're playing as Pontus, for example, it makes the game feel stale and breaks the immersion. Some mods add a ton of units, but you can still essentially spam particular units and be fine with your armies that look the same as each other, or at least very similar. This is, of course, immersion breaking for me personally, and not very historical, since when kingdoms and republics expanded, they had to adapt and utilize a lot of local auxiliaries and varied kinds of armies depending on where they were fighting. I would say that Divide et Impera has perhaps one of the most impressive and historical unit rosters and AOR system of any Total War mod I've ever played. In Europa Barbarorum 2, especially, the mod team utilized the Medieval 2 unit recruitment pool system in order to make recruitment and retraining challenging and interesting, in addition to EB's AOR system, which essentially forced the player to recruit a diverse array of units. This does feel just a tad gamey to me, since in Medieval 2, recruitment is not tied to population, and these unit availability pools seem rather arbitrary sometimes. All of these issues are indeed rectified in Divide et Impera due to its population mechanic and AOR system combined. The excellent colorful unit cards and well-designed diverse units also contribute to feeling immersed in the period, and you feel like you are really commanding an ancient army, rather than generic pieces on a chessboard. In terms of historical accuracy, Divide et Impera does an excellent job. It takes a lot of inspiration from Europa Barbarorum, especially in terms of a lot of the unit rosters. Though DEI has not localized unit names to the same degree as EB or even Invasio Barbarorum mods, I am actually okay with this. Even though I am familiar with some of the ancient languages in this period, and I don't have a problem with the localizations, I also have no issue with them being in Greek as a standard or Latin. I don't feel like this affects immersion negatively or anything. The faction names being in their native language are also a nice touch. Of course, there are a few historical niggles in the game that don't exist in the extreme historical mods like EB. For example, the city in Comagene, which is in Syria province in the game, is called Samosata, even though it wasn't constructed yet. Another anachronism is the Georgian swordsman, which really should be called Kartvelian, or perhaps Colchian, since those kingdoms were separate at the time and there was no kingdom called Georgia. The city of Tushpa is to the southwest of Lake Van, when it should be on the southeastern shore. Of course, our inability to edit the map really causes problems in this regard. But of course, these and many other details are tiny, tiny nitpicks, and I understand why these concessions had to be made, so this is not a big deal at all, in my opinion. In the grand scheme of things, Divide et Impera's realism is phenomenal, and the fact that there are only a few tiny microscopic nitpicks, with many of those nitpicks being due to hard-coded, non-editable aspects of Rome 2, is a testament to the exceptional effort of the Divide et Impera team. I applaud them for their excellent work in this department. A quick note regarding the AI. The campaign and battle AI are really good. This especially goes for the campaign AI. In vanilla Rome 2, the AI has serious problems in terms of building up its empire effectively, and in defending their empire. In DEI, garrisons are better, in the first place, and the AI seems to manage its armies better and makes more interesting, varied armies and decides to build more better buildings. Additionally, due to this better AI and the population mechanic making conquests difficult, creating client states in troublesome regions actually becomes a viable option for once, which is great. There are also a nice diverse array of well-fleshed-out playable factions, all with their own unique playstyles, unique units, reforms, methods of managing supplies, unique population classes, etc. Each faction is very well done, and they have really put in a lot of effort to making these factions really feel equal in terms of their playability and their fun factor. In conclusion, Divide et Impera is an exceptional mod that is indeed aimed at the fans of slower-paced, more historical mods for the original Rome Total War, like Rome Total Realism and Europa Barbarorum. In large part, I would say it succeeds in making Rome 2 more historical and slower-paced, while not making it feel like a slog or a grind. While I would argue that Europa Barbarorum and its sequel for Medieval 2 have a higher degree of historical fidelity, a lot of that feeling to me comes from the inability to edit many aspects of Rome 2, especially the map. While I like Rome 2 vanilla a lot, and I feel like, especially after all the patches, it is an excellent game that addresses a lot of my issues that I had with the original Rome Total War in terms of its realism, historical accuracy, and game mechanics, Divide et Impera takes Rome 2 to another level. While vanilla Rome 2 and some of its mods are more frantic and fast-paced, Divide et Impera allows you to sit back and strategize and think several steps ahead without rushing. Do I feel like it's the same caliber of overhaul as Europa Barbarorum? No, I don't think so, but that's largely because in Rome 2, this is simply not possible due to its many hard-coded aspects. In any case, as a player that loves building, Divide et Impera is a great experience and really tones down the frantic nature of the game in favor of slow-paced strategizing and building up, which I really personally appreciate a lot. However, if you are a player that prefers constant massive battles, more fast-paced aggressive AI, and constant high-stakes pressure from the get-go, then an overhaul mod like Wars of the Gods is for you, and Divide et Impera will not really be up your alley. If you want a slightly better battle system, a better campaign map, a more difficult campaign, and a game with more advanced mechanics built into it, then you might want to try Ancient Empires for Attila. I give Divide et Impera my full recommendation, and I am definitely going to be playing more of it. I am sorry I never had the pleasure of trying it out the past several years before I started really playtesting it for this review. Divide et Impera is the best Rome 2 experience I've had, personally, and I will be following its development closely from now on. I will definitely also do some playthroughs of DEI to delve deeper into the mechanics and show off more of the great features of this mod. It is one of the best Total War experiences available today, ever. Great job, DEI modding team. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. I mostly make videos about the Total War series, highlighting mods that I think still deserve attention today, or those that have been underrated or overlooked. DEI is, of course, none of those things, but sometimes I cover popular mods as well. I cover both the older classic games as well as the newer historical titles. If you'd like to support the channel, please consider liking this video and subscribing, and telling your friends that might be interested to subscribe as well. I would really appreciate it. Thanks again for all your help. I'll see you next time. Empire Total War 1.5, a review of Imperial Destroyer. I had given up on Empire Total War many years ago. I had just had my fill. The game was fun with several great mods such as Empire Realism, Darth Mod, and others including The Rights of Man, one of my favorites. But for me, the game was just very slow-paced and buggy in too many aspects. I decided to pick up the game again and make my retrospective review several weeks ago, and I had noticed a new mod had risen to prominence in the Total War community, Imperial Destroyer. I had some strange first impressions based on the reviews. One thread on the Total War Center forums states that Imperial Destroyer takes out more than it puts in, or something to that effect. The thread was intriguing to me, and actually made me want to try out this mod even more. There had been less is more mods before. The Battle Axe mod for Medieval 2 comes to mind, but I don't believe that there is another mod for Empire that would make someone start such a thread. Empire Total War does suffer from being rather bloated. It has many added features that weren't present in previous Total Wars, and it has even more diplomacy options than the later Shogun 2 and Rome 2. However, the problem was a lot of those new features didn't work correctly anyway. Empire's diplomacy AI is ridiculous, the campaign AI is brainless, and the battle AI is woeful. The sieges don't work. The tech tree is massive, bloated, and practically worthless in many aspects. The battle animations and effects are a bit lackluster and lack the punch of prior and later Total Wars. The battles aren't exactly realistic, and the unit design for many of the factions is quite bland, and the graphics in general could do with an overhaul. Enter Imperial Destroyer. Imperial Destroyer is a complete overhaul of Empire Total War. Where other mods fix a few issues while introducing others, Imperial Destroyer deserves praise for trying to do it all. Darth Mod Empire tries to bring back the punch of previous Total Wars while overhauling the graphics and fixing many of the AI problems, and for the most part it does that. However, it does this at the expense of fast-paced gameplay, and in my opinion, the battles and campaign end up being a bit of a slog, and the AI could still be improved. Empire Realism to me is unmatched in terms of its battle system, and really fixes a lot of the technical issues of Empire. But this mod is mainly focused on the mechanics, and Empire remains a last-gen sort of experience there. Imperial Destroyer really feels like a next-gen Empire in some respects. Imperial Destroyer overhauls the graphics in a way I have not seen before, putting even Darth Mod's overhaul to shame in some aspects. The campaign map looks more like it could be from Empire 2 Total War. I didn't even know the campaign map could be overhauled in such a way. While the existing provinces can't be edited, they were able to add a few new provinces and new factions to the campaign, which is exceptional. The battle effects, in my opinion, are simply unmatched. They take the Darth Mod effects and kick them up a notch, but they don't feel unrealistic at all. They're just very entertaining and immersive and dynamic. In terms of mechanics, Imperial Destroyer is almost unprecedentedly good. Scary good at times. The campaign AI is far more intelligent and aggressive, knowing when it can win and when it can't, and it's probably the best in terms of making a few sizable armies, rather than 1,000 tiny ones. Some of the campaign mechanics have been removed here, such as province trading, but unfortunately it had to be done, or it probably had to be done. The Empire campaign AI just could not understand this concept well enough. This is in fact why CA did not have province trading in Shogun 2 and Rome 2. The AI just couldn't handle it. The units look phenomenal. I don't know exactly what it is, but the colors and graphics have a kick to them in Imperial Destroyer that they don't have in a lot of other mods. They just look ready for battle. The strongest aspect of Imperial Destroyer, in my opinion, is the battle AI. While the improvements to the campaign AI are phenomenal, and make the campaign experience 1,000 times better, the work on the battle AI here is some of the best I've ever seen. I've seen it make moves I thought I would never see a Total War AI make, and I certainly never expected this out of Empire's AI. The AI can carefully plan its advance, hold its battle line, and protect its generals. It does everything it can to outflank you. If the AI has the cavalry advantage and you're outnumbered and unable to counter them, you're done for. The flanking abilities of the AI are great, and the AI actively goes for it in an aggressive manner. The AI is so aggressive that it's kind of refreshing. though sometimes it can be overly aggressive like Shogun 2. If the AI has the advantage, you better watch out and rethink your battle tactics. The battles in Imperial Destroyer are fast and furious, and they really make this mod stand out. A lot of this is made possible by the effects and the sounds overhaul in Imperial Destroyer. The musket shots and the battle cries make the game feel more visceral. In addition to the best battlefield smoke effects I've seen in any mod, it even gives Napoleon's Whiff of Sulphur mod a run for its money. It makes the battlefield feel more alive than in other Empire Total War mods. Your troops also move rather quickly and are not as slow as in other mods, so you don't have to wait for years for your armies to engage one another. But you still have plenty of time to plan out your moves. Ammunition is quite low here. You do get a number of shots, but you run out more quickly than other mods. There are options available to increase ammunition if you don't like the default ones. The goal of this is to force the battle lines to charge at one another, so that most battles don't end without infantry charges and melee. Battles in this period did feature a lot of fierce infantry melee combat, and Imperial Destroyer's default settings facilitate this. It is definitely a bit extreme in my opinion. I definitely think ammunition should be increased a little bit, at least, but I appreciate the more active and fierce feeling it gives to the combat. It distinguishes it from other mods very much, in my opinion, even though I don't feel like it's done perfectly here. The campaign also starts out rather strangely. You begin the game with no money at all. I personally don't like this at all, really, and I wish it would be changed. Of course, this is all subject to change since the mod is still in development. The campaign has also been enhanced to a degree, not seen in many other mods. There are new provinces and factions like the Hetmanate, and these are all very important enhancements. Not all of the factions feel fully fleshed out or fully playable. Some of them are missing descriptions, and some of them have economies that are just too small to compete effectively at the start. Though this also offers interesting challenges should you choose to play such a faction. In any case, there is still work to be done on the mod, that's for sure. In regards to issues, there are indeed quite a few. Sometimes the battle AI will freeze. I have encountered this once during a siege assault by the enemy. The campaign AI can sometimes be too aggressive for my liking and it wants to declare war a bit too much. While Imperial Destroyer does make the Empire experience more focused, it does so at the expense of some aspects that made Empire what it is, and this is both to the game's advantage and detriment. All of these improvements combined is why I feel that Imperial Destroyer is perhaps the most interesting mod for Empire Total War to try out in 2020. Empire here feels like a brand new game in pretty much every aspect. The campaign map feels refreshed, though it is a little bit dark for my taste. The campaign AI is pretty brutal and doesn't ask for all your regions every turn anymore. The battle AI is exceptionally good. Really, it's great, all things considered. However, the mod definitely feels a bit rough around the edges and needs a little more work before I can recommend it wholeheartedly. You can help the mod developers by downloading and trying out the mod and providing valuable feedback. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next mod review or the next Let's Play episode. I hope you're enjoying all the new content I have on the channel. I know I'm getting pretty close to 1,000 subscribers here, so I wanted to thank you all for your support. It really means a lot to me. Thank you all for tuning in and watching my content, and having a good time. So I'll see you in the next one. Empire Total War Enhanced, a review of the Rights of Man, mod for Empire Total War. A lot of mods for Empire Total War take an extreme approach to fixing the issues of the game. They add in a ton of units, completely overhaul the campaign and battle mechanics, adding new things all over the place, and sometimes even make Empire feel even more bloated than it already is. As I've gotten older, I've begun to appreciate the more subtle modifications, that try their best to preserve the essence of the game while also improving all its aspects. Additionally, I also appreciate it more when mods don't slow down the battles too much. Enter the Rights of Man for Empire Total War. The Rights of Man is an overhaul of Empire Total War, but it doesn't turn the game on its head. It doesn't make every faction playable, it doesn't push the graphics to the limit, it doesn't push the game engine to the point of instability. Additionally, the Rights of Man does not add 100 different types of extremely similar units, which prevents unnecessary UI clutter, making the whole experience feel more clean. There still are additional units, as well as a lot of AOR units, but the recruitment UI does not feel cluttered. All of these aspects are balanced in the Rights of Man, and that's why it has always been one of my favorite overhaul mods for Empire Total War. A note about the AI. The campaign AI is one of the biggest issues in Empire, and the Rights of Man really solves or mitigates a lot of its insanity. You won't get ridiculous requests often at all, and you won't have many random or nonsensical declarations of war. Overall, the campaign is now more active. It is not as easy to manage your empire passively, and you have to think about keeping your provinces happy and improving your economy all the time. Doing all this while fighting a large war is definitely harder in the Rights of Man. There are additional units in the Rights of Man, but they definitely don't overdo it by adding 10 different types of line infantry with slightly different skins. While I appreciate mods that do add a ton of units, in the end, in my opinion, it clutters up the UI unnecessarily, since these units end up not fundamentally impacting the battle experience. However, the Rights of Man does include a good area of recruitment system, so that you don't end up recruiting the same units all around the world. For example, if you're playing as the Dutch, you recruit VOC line infantry and cavalry in addition to sepoy infantry in your Indian colonies, while in America you have access to a different set of troops. Georgia has access to Chevsurs, and there are a slew of other unique units as well. The important thing here is that these units are well distributed. You won't have 1,000 possible units to recruit in a single province. Additionally, there are limits on the number of local auxiliaries you can recruit, which again encourages the player to upgrade their provinces to get access to an even greater variety of units and recruit better armies in their colonies. This encourages greater diversity in armies and combats the blandness of vanilla Empire, all while avoiding cluttering the UI. The battle effects in the Rights of Man are also good, the sounds of battle especially. It's somewhere between vanilla and the more extreme mods like Imperial Destroyer. You also have 3 options for the smoke effects: light, medium, and full. These options are provided for the benefit of players who have less powerful systems. If you're playing Empire on an underpowered computer, you can use the light or medium effects and you'll get better performance. It's a nice touch, and I feel like the effects here are realistic and not too in your face or cartoony. The tech and building trees have also been redone, so your progression is more dynamic. You definitely will have to pay more attention to the tech tree in the Rights of Man, since it is definitely made a more important factor here. I'm not a huge fan of the way the tech tree is handled in general in Empire and Napoleon. It is definitely much better in Shogun 2 and less so in Rome 2. But the changes introduced by the Rights of Man are good. Again, a lot of mods slow things down to a crawl in many aspects, but I feel like the Rights of Man has found a good balance here for technology and building progression. The governments have also been changed quite a bit, and their impacts have been increased. You'll definitely feel a bigger difference between an absolute monarchy and a republic. Trying to modernize while having an absolute monarchy is very tough, while fighting large wars as a republic is more difficult, with increased recruitment costs. Another nice touch in this regard is the French army after the transition to a republic. The army is reskinned and redone to reflect this change and the historical army of the French Republic. As I noted above, the campaign AI in the Rights of Man is pretty good. The battle AI has also been changed, and it has also been improved quite a bit. The AI correctly reacts to situations when it is overmatched, or when it has the advantage, trying its best to flank you and engage your battle line's weak points. It isn't the best battle AI I've ever seen, but it is competent and can make your life difficult if it has sufficient force. The aspect I think most people hate about Empire the most are the siege assault battles. They are tedious and horrible and broken and never-ending. While the siege assaults are still tedious in the Rights of Man, inevitably, the AI at least behaves semi-rationally, at least in the battles I've played. Naval battles have also been rebalanced and feel more realistic, with a big increase in range for projectiles. In conclusion, if you want a mod that stays true to the game Empire is, and doesn't try to make it something it's not, the Rights of Man is an excellent mod to try out. A lot of its changes are focused on fixing and enhancing the experience, all while playing to Empire Total War's strengths. I appreciate the massive total overhauls of Empire Total War that add new mechanics, drastically upgrade the graphics, and add 1,000 new units. But personally, at least for now, I prefer the subtle overhaul of the Rights of Man. Everything has been altered and rebalanced, but it is hard to tell until you realize that you're actually having difficulty controlling your empire, and the AI is developing in a competent way. If I were to criticize something about the mod, I would say that I really wish they made a few more factions playable, like Portugal, Georgia, Persia, Savoy, and the Murals. These factions do receive some new units and changes in the Rights of Man, but just not quite enough to make them playable factions. In any case, for all the reasons noted in this review, I give the Rights of Man a high recommendation. It is a complete mod and offers a complete experience, and it doesn't deserve to be forgotten. It is still worth your time in 2020 if you like Empire Total War, or if you want to revisit it again and give it another chance. Thanks for watching. If you like my content, please like this video and subscribe for more historical Total War mod reviews, gameplay videos, retrospectives, and discussions. I'll see you in the next one. A review of the Rights of Man 2, mod for Napoleon Total War. I recently reviewed the Rights of Man mod for Empire Total War, and thought that it would be appropriate to simultaneously work on a review of its sequel, the Rights of Man 2, for Napoleon Total War. Napoleon Total War is definitely one of my personal favorite Total War games, and honestly, it is probably the first Total War game I've played where I thought that the vanilla game was good enough to enjoy even without mods. That doesn't mean the game isn't without its issues, especially in terms of the AI, which, while it is no doubt better than the disaster that was Empire's AI, still has lots of problems. Enter the Rights of Man 2. Like its predecessor, this mod does not seek to make Napoleon Total War unrecognizable. It tries to do exactly what the original Rights of Man did for Empire, but making the game more difficult both on the campaign map and in battles. Through rebalanced mechanics, an improved AOR system, improved campaign and battle AI, all leading to a more challenging and rewarding experience. Let's get into it. Since the Rights of Man 2 is a sequel, it takes a lot of the design philosophy from the original mod and applies it to Napoleon. It strives to slow down the campaign and battle gameplay a bit to make it more deliberate, but not to an extreme degree like other mods, and it avoids making the campaign a grind. It rebalances essentially every mechanic in the game, including the technology and building trees, in order to facilitate the more deliberate campaign experience as well. Like the version for Empire Total War, campaigns are much tougher in the Rights of Man too. You can't just steamroll over enemy factions without thinking about province management and the sustainability of your economy. You have to be able to balance the costs of maintaining your armies and navies while strengthening your control of newly conquered provinces, which can be tough. In the Rights of Man too, liberating countries and establishing protectorates becomes a more viable strategy, since if you conquer a province but don't have enough troops to maintain control of it, you can rely on establishing a protectorate to keep control and establish buffer zones as well, if you can no longer advance. Additionally, garrisons, like in the Rights of Man for Empire, have been strengthened, so you will be better able to defend your provinces with garrisons, and it will be tougher to actually assault enemy cities without sufficient force. Napoleon Total War is an excellent game that suffers a little bit from a replayability issue. While I enjoy it very much, including all of the campaigns, the combat does get a bit samey after a while, since you're constantly fighting very similar European armies all the time. Napoleon definitely lacks Empire's ambition in terms of the campaign map as well. However, the Rights of Man 2 does mitigate this all a bit by adding several new regional AOR units, like the Albanian Warband unit, as well as attack column units. These attack columns of infantry and cavalry are larger and slower than standard regiments and serve different purposes on the battlefield. The cavalry attack columns are larger and thus more devastating than the standard cavalry units when used correctly, but their lack of maneuverability makes them vulnerable to mass infantry fire and cavalry charges from more nimble units. It's the same story with the infantry attack columns. These units are larger and slower, so if you have a good mix of troops, you can really strategize and use these columns effectively. France starts the campaign with the technology needed to recruit these troops, while other factions have to research them. Additionally, each nation has access to different types of attack columns, based on the strategies they employed historically. In order to make playing each nation feel a bit more unique in terms of gameplay, each country has certain advantages when it comes to their basic units as well. British infantry are a bit slower and more expensive, while French infantry are faster, which all reflect certain battlefield and logistical realities from the period. The Rights of Man 2 has a few extra features that were not part of the original that are very important to note. It includes a couple of custom Europe campaigns, one starting in 1805 and one in 1812 with the Russian invasion. These are excellent additions to the campaign and definitely add to the replayability of Napoleon, since they are not simply campaigns with certain provinces under the control of a different faction. You get access to a bunch of new playable factions, and you get a lot of unique missions based on what the historical goals were for each faction during that time. They are definitely much appreciated since I felt the vanilla Europe campaign was a bit weak. I want to talk a bit about the campaign and battle AI. The Rights of Man for Empire did tweak the AI in Empire Total War, but it didn't quite go as far as some other mods. While I found the campaign AI to be very good, I found that the battle AI was just competent but not great. Both the campaign and battle AIs in the Rights of Man 2 are excellent. I'm especially impressed by the battle AI. It is aggressive, it will flank you and try to catch you off guard, and it protects its general very well, which is very important. The battle AI is truly great and functions very well when paired with the rebalanced land and naval combat. Really great battles here. Some of the best Napoleon battles I've had. A note about the campaign AI. It is designed to function the best at normal difficulty. Everyone will declare war on you above normal campaign difficulty, and the AI will come after you personally. However, the campaign has been balanced with this in mind, so a normal campaign will still be quite difficult, and the AI will be a competent opponent. The Rights of Man 2 also includes excellent graphical effects, including a modified version of the Whiff of Sulfur smoke mod, as well as great battle sounds. In conclusion, I have to say that The Rights of Man 2, while being the successor to the original mod for Empire, is an excellent mod in its own right. I would say that since Napoleon is a great game and is a tighter, more focused experience than Empire, The Rights of Man 2 didn't have to do as much to improve Napoleon. However, they indeed went above and beyond, and I'd say they did an even better job with The Rights of Man 2. It's an incredibly fun mod that really adds a new layer of difficulty and challenge to Napoleon Total War, both in terms of the campaign and battles, without causing it to feel like a grind and making it very fun at the same time. Thanks for watching. I hope you liked this video. I'll see you in the next one. A review of Invasio Barbarorum 2, Conquestus Britanniae, the mod for Medieval 2 Total War. The Invasio Barbarorum series is a group of mods that all deal with the late Roman period, and some even stretch into late antiquity following the collapse of the Western Roman Empire. Most of the mods are for the original Rome Total War, but in fact there are a couple of mods in the series that have been released for Medieval 2 Total War as well. Africa Vandalorum and Conquestus Britanniae. In this video, we'll be taking a look at the latter, which is a mod about the period right after the Roman legions left the British Isles for good. This was a time of change and migration. The Angles and Saxons were on their way to invade Britain. The Roman presence in Gaul was in a tenuous position. There were several chiefdoms and principalities that were now free of Roman control. The Frankish kingdom was gaining strength on the mainland, and the tribes that were already independent, such as the Picts, have new opportunities for expansion with the Roman behemoth gone. There are a good assortment of factions to choose from, including Dalriata, the Picts, the invading Saxons and Angles, Roman successor states including the remnant of the Western Roman Empire in northern Gaul, the Franks, and several others. Battles are frequent and fun in this mod. It uses similar principles when compared to the battles of other Invasio Barbarorum mods. The battles feel dynamic, with very effective charges, long melees, and pretty stubborn armies. It is tough to get a mass rout going when compared to other mods. The battles here are definitely bloodbaths. In terms of balancing, I find that cavalry charges here are devastating when compared to other mods, which was a bit surprising to me, but it didn't feel unfair or anything. If you bog cavalry down in melee, they will fall. The unit rosters are nice and as diverse as they can be for a regional campaign like this. I especially like the Roman-style units utilized by the Western Roman Rump state present in northern Gaul, as well as the successor states like the Romano-British and the British Council in England. It is fun to see armies composed of Roman-style troops mixed in with a lot of the locals. It makes it really feel like a late Roman barbarian invasion type of campaign, which is exactly what the modders here were aiming to do. I really have to praise the team for the work they put in to make every faction feel fleshed out. This is a very troubling period for historians, due to the lack of contemporary sources, and a lot of things of course have to be surmised or assumed based on archaeological findings or much later testimony. The Conquestus Britanniae team has done a great job in this regard, and it really adds to the immersion factor here, The traits, ancillaries, missions for each faction and character are also very well done. The units, 2D UI elements like building and unit cards, character portraits, and campaign map models are also nicely done and make the mod stand out. I haven't played Thrones of Britannia, but I know a lot of people have noted the fact that their unit rosters are not the most diverse. Unfortunately, when you're limited to a regional campaign in a rather isolated region, most of the units fielded by the factions are going to be fairly similar. The forces of the British factions here are mostly infantry heavy, with limited cavalry. This is not a fault of the mod, it's just the reality we have to deal with. The mod is a bit unstable. There is a crash you will get without fail at certain bridge battles, and it is quite unfortunate. This is a regional campaign, so it would have been nice to see this issue ironed out. You expect that a smaller campaign like this would be a bit more polished than a grand one. I also find the campaign map, which is huge by the way, and is essentially a magnified version of the British Isles, Denmark, parts of Scandinavia, and northern Gaul, and parts of Germania as well with the Alemanni and the Thuringians. It feels a bit flat at times, but I think that's simply due to its scale and size. In conclusion, Invasio Barbarorum 2, Conquestus Britanniae, is an excellent mod, with excellent atmosphere that really captures the chaotic late and post-Roman periods in Britain. In this regard, it is definitely worthy of bearing the Invasio Barbarorum name. It is definitely not a full sequel to the Invasio Barbarorum mods for Rome Total War. It is a regional campaign, and there is no doubt about that. This mod may tide you over as we wait for the full Invasio Barbarorum 2 Flagellum Dei Grand Campaign release for Medieval 2. I know I can't wait for that one. Thanks for watching! If you liked this video, please leave a like and subscribe if you'd like to see more videos about the historical Total War games and their mods. I'll see you next time. A review of The Rights of Man 3, The Road to Kyoto, mod for Total War Shogun 2. Following my reviews of The Rights of Man for Empire and The Rights of Man 2 for Napoleon, I decided that it would be prudent to review the third mod in the Rights of Man mod series. The Rights of Man 3, The Road to Kyoto, for Total War Shogun 2. The design philosophy of this mod is very similar to that of the previous two modifications, trying to make the gameplay mechanics deeper, both on the campaign map and in battles. Of course, another important feature of all the Rights of Man mods is that they strive for historical accuracy, while preserving the feel of the vanilla game. The Rights of Man 3, The Road to Kyoto, definitely does all of this, and is probably the mod in the series that introduces the most radical changes to the base game, since the changes here are definitely more immediately visible than in Empire or Napoleon. Those games, despite their historical issues, did not need as many extensive changes. Shogun 2, on the other hand, does need significant changes in order to be more historical. While Shogun 2 Vanilla is an excellent game and is the most well-done vanilla Total War game that I enjoy quite a bit without any mods at all, it definitely has more historical issues than Empire and especially Napoleon. The most noticeable changes in the Rights of Man 3 are to the tech tree, unit rosters, and building chains. Every Total War game has a large degree of abstraction in order to make the game feasible as a Total War game. However, when comparing the abstraction of a game like Empire or Napoleon to Shogun 2, you can definitely see that Shogun 2's combat is far more gamey. Now, I'm not knocking their design decisions here. It's a great game. It's just not very historical, especially in terms of the battle system. Having units like Yari Ashigaru or Bo Ashigaru or Katana Samurai just doesn't really make any historical sense for the period. This basically goes for almost all of the units in Shogun 2. Since the Rights of Man series always has been about increasing the historicity of the game, they had a larger task ahead of them here due to the design of Shogun 2 as opposed to Empire or Napoleon. The combat in the Rights of Man 3 feels very different compared to Vanilla Shogun 2. The battles in Vanilla Shogun 2 are fast and furious, though I felt that the pace of combat in Vanilla was good. It just wasn't quite as fast as the original Rome Total War, which I feel is way too fast, and I feel they found a good balance, creative assembly that is. It was just a tad too fast, perhaps, and the Rights of Man 3 definitely slows things down and rebalances the game in this regard. Vanilla Shogun 2's combat actually mostly reminds me of the old Fire Emblem games for Game Boy Advance in terms of the strategy. You have the rock, paper, scissors sort of combat, where spear beats cavalry, sword beats spear, etc. These were the fundamentals of combat in Shogun 2, and they still are. However, things have been made more historical. Katana infantry has been replaced by more appropriate units, such as Daisho samurai that have bows and swords. Since during the Sengoku period, katanas were basically secondary weapons, and there really weren't samurai simply armed with a katana. This goes for many units in the game. For example, generals' bodyguards also have bows now, so they can act as horse archers whenever necessary as well. In this period, warriors, especially samurai warriors, mastered a few different weapons, and this is definitely reflected in the revamped combat in the Rights of Man 3. The rock, paper, scissors combat has also been toned down a bit. It isn't completely eliminated, but the advantages have been reduced, especially in regards to Yari units against cavalry. While Yari units will still beat cavalry no problem, the reduced bonus at least allows for the greater utilization of cavalry against these units from the flanks. The range of gunpowder units has also been increased, which I think is a very nice change. Additionally, generals' bodyguard units are less fragile, which is actually a change I appreciate for Shogun 2. Since I am a big fan of Vanilla Shogun 2, I wouldn't say that all of these changes make the game significantly better or more fun, but if you felt like the Shogun 2 combat was too fast and perhaps unfair in certain aspects, then you will appreciate these changes very much. In terms of the campaign map gameplay, things have also been changed up. In the vanilla game, as most factions, it was tough to get matchlock units to be useful until much later in the game, when they are already somewhat unnecessary. This is not the case in the Rights of Man 3. Just like in the mods for Empire and Napoleon, techs and buildings have been rebalanced, and I have to say that I really appreciate these changes. It makes the tech tree feel more important. Now you can recruit matchlock units much sooner in the campaign, so they can really make an impact. Combine this with the slower movement speed on the battle map, and they can be quite devastating. I really enjoyed using matchlock units in the vanilla campaign, and I do like the grind to actually get access to them, but their implementation in the Rights of Man 3 earlier in the tech tree makes them more relevant and less of a novelty. I definitely like the rebalanced tech tree quite a bit, and I feel like it makes more of a difference here than in Empire or Napoleon. One of the issues of Shogun 2 was in the lack of diversity in its units. While this lack of diversity is unavoidable, the Rights of Man 3 at least does add an AOR system that allows you to recruit specific unique units in certain regions, so that at least it does provide some local diversity, though the units are not that different from their generic counterparts. What the mod does provide is more choice in the game. There are now several different types of Yari units, Naginata Ashigaru, Katana Ashigaru, different types of matchlock and bow units. It's all good stuff. Additionally, you can now recruit mercenary matchlock Ashigaru from markets rather than from a Nanban trade port, which I find to be a good change. In terms of the graphics, there are new units and techs added, and the additional 2D graphics don't look out of place. As per usual, the Rights of Man 3 utilizes a blood and smoke mod, which looks very nice indeed, though I enjoyed the vanilla effects as well. In conclusion, I think The Rights of Man 3 is a great continuation of the first two mods. It rebalances the campaign and battle gameplay. It slows down the pace of the game and improves the immersion, since it is a lot less hectic than vanilla. It makes the unit rosters in the game more historically accurate, and tones down the strict rock-paper-scissors formula of vanilla Shogun 2. And, most importantly, it makes the gunpowder units more relevant in its revamp of the tech tree and building chains. Most importantly, it does all of this while keeping the essence of the game intact. This is an excellent mod for an already excellent game, and if you want a different experience, then this could be the mod for you. Thanks for watching! Please like this video and subscribe if you'd like to see more content about the historical Total War games and their mods. I'll see you in the next one. A high-era medieval campaign for Rome Total War. A review of Fall of the Cross, Rise of the Crescent, mod for Rome Total War. A submod of Chivalry Total War. This submod, Fall of the Cross, Rise of the Crescent, or FCRC, had been lost for quite a while, but a kind Total War Center forum denizen was able to find a copy and re-upload it for all of us to enjoy. This mod is essentially a high-era campaign for the classic medieval mod Chivalry Total War, complete with new factions, scripts, and a new 1191 start date. Most of the factions have remained the same in FCRC, though there are a few differences. The Republic of Pisa has been replaced by Venice due to Pisa's defeats in the mid-12th century and its decline in political and economic importance. The Teutonic Order is now playable, which is a very interesting challenge. The Fatimids have been replaced by the Ayyubids, and the rest of the lineup is fairly standard, including the Duchy of Bohemia, France, England, Denmark, Armenia, the Byzantines, Aragon, Castile, etc. The Crusader states, much like in the 1099 campaign in Standard Chivalry Total War, are represented as provinces of the involved European powers. So England controls the Crusader Kingdom of Cyprus and a few Levantine provinces to represent the Third Crusade. Norman Sicily controls Antioch, etc. The mod does include scripts, unlike Chivalry's main campaign. This makes the campaign a bit more dynamic in my opinion, and is a great addition. I have to say, the Teutonic Knights campaign is pretty fun and unusual. You start out with a couple of forts in pagan provinces in the Baltic, along with a few knights and infantry. Additionally, your faction leader is in the Levant, along with another unit of knights. Maintaining control is very difficult with your meager forces, but as you pile up the victories against pagan foes in the north, the papacy will grant you more and more financial assistance as you continue this Baltic crusade. It's an interesting campaign, made possible by the new scripts. The French campaign is also interesting, as France is in a very weak position compared to its neighbors. The Bohemian campaign is as tough as always, and the Armenian campaign is actually tougher here than in the original Chivalry, due to its neighbors being more consolidated. Unfortunately, the mod is not completely stable. Its final patch was never completed, so it's not quite as polished as it could be. However, perhaps since it has been re-uploaded, someone might pick it up and fix some of the remaining bugs. It's not unplayable by any means, but you will suffer the occasional crash. FCRC is an excellent submod for a classic mod. Check out my review and let's play of Chivalry Total War for further details about the mod that FCRC is based on. If you'd like to see a gameplay video of FCRC, let me know in the comments down below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. A review of Broken Crescent, mod for Medieval 2 Total War. If you want a mod about the medieval Middle East, then one mod stands above the rest. Broken Crescent for Medieval 2 Total War. The Near East was portrayed poorly in Rome Total War, was overlooked in Empire Total War, and was completely botched in Medieval 2. Broken Crescent rectifies this and more, with a complete focus on the Near East, stretching from Thrace all the way to Central Asia and parts of India. The factions included in Broken Crescent are mostly overlooked in many other mods, and in vanilla, of course, and it's great to see them here. The superpowers of this time are, of course, the Ayyubids, the Khwarezm Shah, the Byzantines, the Seljuks, and the Ghaznavids, and they are all included here. Additionally, several medium-sized players are also playable here, including the Kingdom of Georgia, the Abbasids, Armenia, the Zengids, the Ghorids, the Rajputs, the Mamlakate of Sind, etc. Some smaller factions that aren't included in a lot of other mods get a lot of attention here, including the Imamates of Oman and Yemen, and a few others. Every faction has a nice fleshed out unit roster. As a smaller faction, it feels good to upgrade your cities and castles and get access to the higher tier units. They all look exceptional, some of the best looking units for Medieval 2 out there. In addition to the graphics, the soundtrack is also excellently done for every culture group. There are also a large amount of religions in the game, which is great for immersion and gameplay. So you have Sunni and Shia Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, Eastern Christianity, Catholicism. There are a lot of beliefs represented here that aren't included in other mods. The gameplay of Broken Crescent actually feels fairly standard. Things are a bit more expensive and take longer to complete than in vanilla, but not too much longer. I think it's a good balance between much slower, heavier mods and very light enhancement mods like Lands to Conquer. Maybe it's because I've been playing Europa Barbarorum 2 lately, but Broken Crescent's campaign map and battle gameplay feels much more standard Medieval 2 to me. And this isn't a bad thing. Cavalry is king here. You need to get them bogged down in melee against your good spearmen, or you'll be in trouble, if you're facing a lot of cavalry. The battle AI isn't the greatest, but it's not the worst either. All in all, it's a very good experience. If you like Medieval 2, you'll like Broken Crescent. In terms of the battles overall, I would say that I feel that archers are a bit nerfed when compared to other mods. Broken Crescent is set in a time period that was very dynamic, the 12th and 13th centuries. The campaign starts in 1174, so it's a good start date. The Kingdom of Jerusalem was about to get crushed by the Ayyubids. Georgia and Armenia were consolidating their power. The Ghorids and the Ghaznavids were going at it. The Khwarezmians were quite powerful. The Abbasids were on their deathbed. And the Byzantines were in a much better position than they were just a century earlier. Thus, it has many nice campaign scripts as well, including the Fourth Crusade that shows up to sack Constantinople and cripple the Byzantines, as well as the Mongol invasions. I find it quite dynamic and interesting, though of course a nightmare if you're playing as the Byzantines or the Khwarezmians. Not everything about Broken Crescent is perfect, of course. No campaign is ever perfect. I suppose what bothers me the most about Broken Crescent is the balance and historicity of the game map. While I applaud the work they've done in Iran, the Levant, and the Iranian Plateau, it feels like the balance and historicity of the Caucasus and Asia Minor suffer just a bit. You have some strange province names for this period, like Komagene, and you have Armenia Major, which is different from the province of Armenia, which is different from the province of Greater Armenia, and of course they don't quite make sense when you look at where the province is on the campaign map. In addition to having way too many provinces in Kilikia. It makes me want to do a submod for Broken Crescent that just improves the map balance and historicity. Let me know if you'd like to see that. I know about the Buff and Shine submod, but I have not yet tried it. Another thing is that I feel that more could have been done to make the gameplay of Broken Crescent a little more unique when compared to other mods. In conclusion, I have to say that Broken Crescent is one of the nicest all-around mods for Medieval 2 Total War. It provides an in-depth campaign focusing on a region that is often overlooked and is very dynamic, with many nice scripts including the Fourth Crusade against Constantinople and the Mongol invasions. You get to play as several factions that get some attention in mods, but not in the vanilla game, such as Georgia, the Abbasids, and Armenia. Additionally, you get to play as several factions that I don't believe are included in any other mod, such as the Imamate of Oman, Yemen, the Rajputs, and a few others. It's quite a nice assortment, and it gives Broken Crescent that flavor that other mods lack. I wish the campaign map was done a bit better in terms of its province divisions, province naming, and settlement distribution, but it's not bad by any means. I suppose I wish the mod offered just a little bit more, but all in all, it's an excellent mod and deserves all the praise it gets for its unique setting, assortment of interesting playable factions, best-in-class units, and overall balance. It's definitely still an excellent mod for Medieval 2 that deserves your attention. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like this video if you'd like to see more videos about the historical Total Wars and their mods. I'll see you next time. A review of Rome Total Realism Platinum Edition 2.0, a classic mod for Rome Total War. First of all, a huge shout out to the channel's first Cataphract tier member, Heath Dion. I really appreciate all the support of our new channel members. Rome Total Realism is one of the most venerable and long-running mod series in Total War history, and Rome Total Realism Platinum Edition is probably the version of the mod that will appeal to the most Rome Total War players. It improves the campaign gameplay significantly with its colony system, campaign map that extends to Bactria, and its settlement balance. Its battles also play very well, slowing down the pace of the combat a good amount, but not as much as other mods like Europa Barbarorum, allowing it to retain that Rome Total War feel rather than seeming like a completely different game. It includes a more toned-down graphical style overall, and it feels a bit more gritty than vanilla Rome. While for me personally, this mod has some issues and doesn't quite go as far as I would like in terms of its devotion to historicity, Rome Total Realism Platinum Edition is definitely a mod that I would recommend to players who feel like Rome Total War misses the mark in terms of its lightning-fast battles and completely ahistorical aspects, but who also feel like Europa Barbarorum or even Roma Surrectum 2 go too far in terms of changing the game. When you fire up Rome Total Realism, you'll immediately notice how the colors of the game are toned down. I don't dislike this, and it does make the game feel a bit more gritty and less cartoony, but I do think that some players might be turned off by this redone color scheme. You'll especially notice this when looking at the faction icons. This redone color scheme extends to the rest of the game, including the campaign map in the bottom left corner, and I do think the colors have been toned down just a bit too much for my liking here. The overall graphical style of the game is good. Not too different from vanilla, but not exactly the same. You'll notice that it's pretty similar to mods like Fall of the Republic, Rise of the Empire, since there are a bunch of mods, including that one, that use certain versions of Rome Total Realism as a base. The sound design here is very nice, and I really like the new soundtrack. It's unique and interesting. The campaign map is one of the best aspects of Rome Total Realism Platinum Edition. You can immediately see how the realism and historicity of the game has been enhanced based on the improved faction starting positions, the extended map that allows for the inclusion of Parthia and Bactria in their correct starting positions, and the redone provinces. While I am a bit spoiled by the campaign map of Europa Barbarorum 2, which I find to be very nice due to being so large, the map here is good, even if it does feel a bit cramped in certain areas, such as Syria, Greece, and the Italian peninsula. The inclusion of factions like Illyria and the consolidation of Rome into one faction also really improved the campaign in my opinion. Is the map perfect? Not exactly. It's definitely not as accurate in certain areas when compared to mods like Roma Surrectum 2 or Europa Barbarorum. Just a couple of specific examples. The city in Comagene province is Samosata, which was not founded yet in 280 BC. A historical option would have been Nymphios, which was later renamed Arsamea. The city of Artaxata is still kept here in Platinum Edition, even though it was not founded until about 100 years after the start date. Though the historical Armenian capital Armavir is indeed included here as the capital. If the team wanted to include another province that would have been more historical, they could have chosen Van, also known as Tushpa or Tospia. The capital of the province of Caucasian Albania is called Albania. There was no city called Albania in Albania. It should be Kabalaka. The lack of the province of Caucasian Iberia, or Kartli, is a bit odd here. But of course I am nitpicking. The map is very well done, just not quite up to the historical gold standards of the Europa Barbarorum and Roma Surrectum 2 maps. The unit rosters in Rome Total Realism Platinum Edition are very well done in my opinion. They don't go too far in changing the vanilla rosters, except when the situation calls for a complete redo, as in the case of Egypt. RTRPE keeps the feel of the various factions different by not going too far. There are a lot of mods that give every faction every kind of unit, which causes the sort of vanilla Medieval 2 issue of factions feeling a bit samey. The Greeks have great, but slow spear infantry, along with comparatively mediocre cavalry support. The Diadochi empires have very nice, well-balanced armies. The Romans have strong infantry but weak cavalry. The Parthians have throwaway infantry but excellent skirmisher and heavy cavalry. The Armenians have a somewhat balanced army with excellent heavy cavalry and infantry better than the Parthians but not on par with the Diadochi armies, etc. I really like how different the factions feel here. This is one of the aspects of Europa Barbarorum 1 I like so much. And RTRPE attains this in a different way, but keeping the unit rosters rather compact and distinct, and also preserving that Rome Total War abstraction that works so well. I really like the battle mechanics in RTRPE. The battles are indeed slower than vanilla, but not as slow as other mods. And it doesn't feel that far removed from the Creative Assembly's vision for Rome Total War. They aren't the most revolutionary battle mechanics, but I like them a lot, and I think it does help the factions feel more distinct in that it's very hard to hold off a phalanx unit from the front with poor infantry before charging from the flank. You have to think a few steps ahead a little more quickly in RTRPE. The campaign gameplay has been slowed down here, since recruitment is not so much tied to barracks, practice range, and stable buildings, so much as to colony-type buildings. When you first conquer a province, you have to construct an Auxilia 1 building, and then as you develop the province, you can construct Auxilia 2 that allows you to recruit a few units from your roster, and the development goes on and on like this. The process of pacifying settlements and converting them sufficiently in order to recruit more of your troops is a rather involved process, and I like how difficult they make it here. You can't just rush and blitzkrieg an enemy empire. You have to pacify regions, build them up sufficiently, and it really makes you think about sacking, destroying, and leaving enemy cities way more often than you have to in vanilla Rome Total War. This is excellent, and I really like the campaign gameplay here. There is definitely more of a back and forth, and it doesn't feel like a grind, in my opinion. When I played Rome Total War for the first time, I was taken aback at its blatant historical inaccuracies in regards to several factions, units, the map, and settlements. One of the issues that bothered me the most, besides the inexplicable portrayal of Egypt, was Parthia's starting situation caused by cutting off the map in the middle of the Caspian Sea. It just didn't make any sense at all, and it really ruined the eastern part of the campaign map. I went immediately searching for a mod, that would make the game feel more realistic in all of these aspects. And when browsing the Total War Center forums back in the day, I found the subforum I was looking for, Rome Total Realism. The version of Rome Total Realism that was out at the time was called Rome Total Realism Platinum Edition, and it was my introduction to the world of Total War mods. Essentially, this is the mod that introduced me to the world of Total War mods, so I will forever be thankful to the RTR team for creating this excellent mod. Is it the most realistic, the most historically accurate mod out there? No, I wouldn't say that. But it's truly a classic mod, and if you feel like EB or Roma Surrectum 2 go too far in changing the game or make it too slow, then RTR-PE is a mod you should check out even today in 2020. There are versions for Barbarian Invasion and Alexander as well, so you can play it with the version of your choice. I played the Alexander version 2.0 for this review. Thanks for watching! It had been a while since I checked out a classic Rome Total War mod, and reviewing the first Rome Total War mod I ever played was quite fun. This was my first review of a mod in the Rome Total Realism series, but it won't be my last. I am planning on reviewing a bunch of them over the next few weeks and months. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoy the historical Total War games and their mods. YouTube has also allowed me to add memberships to the channel recently, so you can join in the description below in order to help improve the channel and keep it going. All members get access to a members-only stream once a month, and Cataphract tier members will get shoutouts in videos as well. I'll see you in the next one. And that's it for all the mod reviews in 2020. I hope you enjoyed it. I know it was a bit of a long one, so I doubt you sat through the whole thing in one sitting, but if you did, thank you very much. Thank you for the support. If you like what I do here on the channel, consider subscribing and consider supporting the channel by becoming a channel member through the link in the description below. Thanks again. I'll see you in the next one.